everyone. Welcome into Full Screen Podcast, the pilot episode of Full Screen Podcast. I'm your host, and I go by Kira Astor, and I'm delighted and honored to be with you here today. Joining me on this ride is my co-host, and probably the only person in my life that appreciates that drip on the Witch King as much as I do. It's Raven Ebert. Hello, Raven. How goes it?
Hi, everybody. It goes well. I'm Raven, and I am a Aragorn sun, Galadriel moon, and Gimli rising. My interests are removing the hobbits from Isengard because they shouldn't be there in the first place, and hanging out with the trees, the Ents, the tree folk, the forest spirits.
And now the Harfoots, probably.
Probably.
Yes.
We're gonna get to really cozy up with them soon. So yeah.
So excited. Well, it's great to have you. What a great intro. I would say my whole birth chart and body belong to Aragorn. So we'll say
Wow.
we'll say up top, this podcast is probably going to be rated R, guys. So just take note.
Yes. Content warning, heavy Aragorn content.
Yes, very, very much
Aragorn, Strider, all of the various aliases he goes by.
LSR, all that, my favorite. All that stuff. You started telling us a little bit about yourself. We know your birth chart. We know my birth chart. But tell the folks a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into why we're here today.
Yeah, I have been kicking around the idea of creating this podcast with Kira for a long time. And we're really excited to do it together because we're both in tech.
Mm-hmm.
I am a product manager at a collaboration and video call company, which has seen a big upswing during the pandemic. And being a product manager basically is, well,
Mini
it's
CEO, unicorn.
yeah, it's definitely a made up email job. I'm not doing any physical labor or moving things or engaging with customer service like you do in retail. But I think that it's definitely a great job to have if you love working with people who tackle the same problem from a variety of different aspects. If you Google what a product manager is, one of the first things that comes up is that it tells you you're the CEO of your product. And that's not 100% true because you don't have unilateral decision making powers, but you do get to decide the direction of your product or maybe an aspect of your product, whether it's software or a physical product. And you're looking at the technical components, how to build it, what features and functionality to put into it, and the direction of where your product is going to go. And that's very much driven by data, by the metrics you are collecting from people that are currently using your product, your current user base, and the people that you want to promote your product to, your future user base. So there are a lot of decisions around who the intended audience for your product is, how to market it to them, understanding their needs and translating them into actual things that you can put into your product and create something that people rely upon and depend on. And I feel that's kind of the way that content has been going lately as well. Once upon a time, the entertainment industry was very insular about outside influences in terms of who it made content for and who it reached out to and how that affected decisions that were made inside the industry. And I want to say after 2008, during the economic shift that happened because of the housing market crash and how things just became less reliable financially, the entertainment industry also started moving towards making content in that sort of dependable, reliable way that very much matches with the same thinking that we have in tech. So it seems like a good time to talk about the confluence of tech and entertainment and how the thinking kind of overlaps. And being that Kira and I are both from tech, we may be able to offer some insight around the decision making that happens on streaming platforms and even the uh, movie studio structure
Mhm.
and the ability for us to make decisions around data is very, very similar to that employed by movie studios making financial decisions on what franchises to continue investment in and what to pull out of, and the general influence of tech and its broad availability to the public and how that's affected our media consumption. So that's why I'm here.
I love it. That was the best intro. So many thoughts coming into my head. First, can you explain to my mom what a product manager is? With all of that, because she googles very frequently what a product manager is, and a trigger for all product folks out there. Shouts to all our project managers, but man, they are not the same. No, 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 no.
No,
um
they are not.
yes, yes, and we'll, in subsequent episodes, we'll likely go into the different roles that contribute to the tech sector at some point. But for now, yes, we're both in product. Yeah, just to add a little bit about me, as Raven said, I've also been in product in the tech sector throughout my career, throughout my life. I started in health tech and kind of worked on data a little bit, then moved on to media. And now I am in the fintech and payment space. And as to why I'm here today, it's because not only are we both in tech and product, which is becoming a key decision maker in the entertainment industry, it's also because we're certified cinephiles, and super obsessed with stories and books and TV, and particularly, and I suspect like many of you listening, obsessed with what goes on behind the camera as well, right? The words and techniques and technology, that powers all that we consume, what happens in the meeting rooms, how a production is mounted, and how it all comes together into this perfect confluence, to us as audiences, as consumers of stories. You know, Raven said beautifully why we're here today, but to add to that, it's just our tagline is demystifying streaming and tech, right? And it's mostly for us as we try to make sense of the world, and try to understand things that are happening right now, because there's not one source really parsing out exactly what's happening. People will cover different things about tech and entertainment, this confluence of Silicon Valley and Hollywood, but it's like I have to at least listen to like three sources and read five articles to like try to make sense. So hopefully through us, right? You're nodding. Yes.
Yes, I agree because I think there's people who write about the entertainment industry that are obviously entrenched in the entertainment industry, but do not really understand some of the thinking around finances, corporate mergers, and other aspects of life that we working in tech are intimately aware with because that's just what we have to deal with everywhere we're working at. It is not unique to a particular sector of tech.
Yes.
So we have that sort of broad view that I think an industry like the entertainment industry, which was fairly shielded and looked upon as very reliable and always made money, is now unsure, and it's moving into sort of a new era of consumption from mass media. So it is an interesting time, definitely. And I think you need different perspectives to be able to make sense of it because you cannot rely on the old ways of thinking to guide you
Yes.
through a new era.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said. to recap, we are witnessing a different ball game, a different world than even 2 years ago, and hopefully we serve as we try to parse and make sense of this world with each other. We also sort of try to help you make sense of the world. And we can all sort of hang out here together, try to understand streaming and tech, and make it all more accessible. Um, all right. With that, let's tell the folks, Raven, about how they can connect with us, tell us what they want to hear about next, and give them the deets of the social meds.
Yeah, all of our podcast episodes will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, the Full Screen Podcast. On there, you'll be able to also find all of our linked social media. We're on Instagram and we're on Twitter at fullscreen_pod. And you can check us out on all of those platforms. Feel free to shout us out, drop us a comment, give us your suggestions on what you'd like to see us cover from a tech and media perspective. We're always curious to learn about the perspective that people outside of the industry have on tech as well. If there are questions you want us to cover about some of the decision making that happens in tech, let us know. We'll do our best to get to that. But in the meantime, definitely check us out again on Twitter and Instagram at fullscreen_pod and our YouTube channel, Full Screen Podcast.
Incredible. Yep. Follow us, hit us up in the comments, get to know what we're up to. We would definitely love to hear from you. All right, so before we dive into today's topic, let me quickly cover what we are gonna do or how we're gonna try to organize ourselves. So format-wise, the first, we have divided ourselves into two parts. Format-wise, part one, we will cover the content that's topical or relevant to the second part, and the second part will focus on the tech and business and strategy portion as it relates to the content. So we'll clearly delineate which one is content, which one is the tech biz strategy part. All right, so today's topic, I'm so excited. I'm so excited about this.
That's what we've been waiting for.
Today's topic, folks, is the rise of Amazon Prime Video, the rings of power, and the battle for IPs. Welcome into the multiplying genre, part one, where we discuss the ever-expanding content that is perhaps topical and relevant to the world at large right now, and the tech discussion later on in the episode, which will be our part two. Today, the Lord of the Rings universe. All right, before we dive deep into this, let's start with talking about how this story is personally meaningful and relevant to us, how we came into this story, and what it means to us right now. What is its impact? Raven, why don't you tell us first about your connection with this franchise, this number one trilogy?
I'm going to be very honest from the top of the hour over here. The connection that I have with the Lord of the Rings franchise is with the original trilogy. I love it so much. I was at that age kind of between like a kid and a teenager when it came out. So I was beginning to be critical of the media that I consumed. I was paying attention to what it was trying to say and how good it looked. At the time, I didn't know the term, but I was really looking at the production value of what I was consuming, whether it was well made, realistic, polished, if there was care and thought put into how the world was built to make it more believable and lived in. And that first trilogy in the Lord of the Rings checked all of those boxes, and it really like opened my third eye to filmmaking. um I hadn't really seen anything at that scale before. I think
Mhm.
the closest I had gotten to something like that was watching maybe Ben-Hur as a child with like my grandparents. So I hadn't seen that kind of like cinema happening on that scale
Mhm.
where you were taken to a time or a place that you're not from, but you're really getting into the story, getting into the characters, and really invested in what's going to happen next. I wasn't even aware that it was a book series when I first started watching the films. Um, it came out in December 2001, the first movie, The Fellowship of the
Mhm.
Ring. And at the time, I had gotten my foot into the door with fantasy through the Harry Potter franchise, like a lot of people my age did.
Mhm.
And it's a very different type of fantasy where it's, the Harry Potter universe exists within our real world. And The Lord of the Rings is just not having anything to do with what's going on. So it's classic high fantasy, the granddaddy of all high fantasy franchises now. Like everything kind of has like a Kevin Bacon-esque number to like 6 degrees of separation from the Lord of the Rings. And I was not prepared for how well the story was going to be told. And it still holds up to this day because I don't think that it was just my tiny brain as a child loving all of these things that I don't love anymore. I actually come to appreciate it more and more as I do like an annual holiday rewatch. And it's really what got me interested into filmmaking, like not just watching films but understanding and appreciating the craft of making movies. And I went through a phase in my mid-teens of like looking up behind the scenes stuff and buying
Mhm.
books about the production of the Lord of the Rings, and kind of being surprised and impressed that this film, while using like cutting edge VFX and CGI to simulate battle scenes, also had like really practical ways of shooting hobbits along with wizards and men and elves and dwarves to like simulate the height differences between them without having the actors compromise on their performance. It was really nice to see that there was so much care put into something that became so successful and brought in so much money and was the antithesis of a cash grab where it was like a labor of love creating
Mhm.
movies in a genre that wasn't really known for bringing in a ton of money at the time.
It's a risk.
So it was a huge risk. And they filmed those movies back to back. So I can even imagine like they didn't have the luxury of being able to like wait to see how the first one was received and make the decision to make the second and third one after that, like a lot of franchises are done now. So it
Denis
was
Villeneuve is so jelly right now. That's sad.
I think that was wise, but that's another story. That was just incredible to see it come out. It was such a breath of fresh air at the time. The second trilogy was, I think, it fell more into the
Name the
traps
second
of
trilogy. Okay.
that would be the Hobbit trilogy.
Yes.
um, one single book split into three movies. So any critique that I see of like the length and feeling like the story and the characters are flailing in the middle, I immediately attribute it to that, where it is just clearly has that essence of studio mandates of where this made money the last time. We need like three movies. I think there were two originally planned, and it was made
Uh-huh.
to three. And you could feel it as no matter how much you loved the universe that Peter Jackson created with the original trilogy, you could definitely feel something was coming off as a little forced in the second one. So I'm less fond of those.
Okay. That's wonderful. I actually didn't know. I don't think we've talked about The Hobbit that much before, so that's good to know where you lie with that. Okay. For me, the connection did start with the books. And this was way before the trilogy was announced. Well, not way before. I definitely did not know about the trilogy when I started reading the book. And it was a combined version of all the three books. And it was very heavy with very small font and just like a paperback that was just like very heavy in my, kid hands. And it was such a dense and interesting and well thought out world that I just could not, even though it took me a while to read, I just could not put it down. And I just have this like vivid memory of just, how the Shire was described and how the sounds and sights and language and names and like the roots of the words that were used just all came together. And that was clear to me as like a little kid. And and then the movies came out, and I mean, forget it. It was just like life changing to witness the visuals of what I had read. You know, I still think about how the screech, like the bone chilling screams and screeches of the Nazgul just like still like give me goosebumps. And like it's so, in some
Oh.
ways, just like how I'd imagined them when I was reading it. And how the void is pictured whenever, Frodo puts on the ring in the original trilogy. And
Mm.
just in general, the stunning visuals of Rivendell, like just the first time you see it. It's just been very meaningful to, transition from the books to the from the words and feel such not betrayal at all, because sometimes you'll go from page to the screen and it's like, what just happened in my life? But it was so much more fulfilling to see that transition and really get to luxuriate more in the story and immerse myself in it, bathe in it, like in the vibrant sunlit fields of the Shire, like Frodo, who never worked a day in his
Ooh.
life. Let's be real.
Lather in the Middle Earth luxurious.
Yes. So yeah, it left me very moved, and I have such, I have such great memories of certain scenes. Like I could talk for hours about that scene where, in the first movie, Aragorn faces the Uruk-hai. And near the end of the movie, and kind of protects and denies the ring, the
Oh,
lore of the ring, and kind of
after
faces the Uruk-hai.
Boromir's spoiler, after
Spoiler.
after Boromir passes away
Right before,
and
or passes into, I suppose, the temptation of the ring. So we've seen one man fall and the other man kind of deny the temptations, which was huge because you
yeah.
see that it's calling to him. Yes.
Yeah, that was a huge arc for him because he thought he had a genealogical weakness to the power of the ring and to like the concept of desire in general, and that he wouldn't be able
Exactly.
to master it. And then you see him really internalize what everyone's been saying, that he is not his ancestor, he's not Isildur, and he is his own person, and you see him come into that realization.
It's so amazing, that scene. Could not get enough. And for many reasons, Viggo Mortensen's obvious sexiness is definitely one of them.
His performance was incredible in all three movies, but particularly in the first one because you have to care about Aragorn to be invested in what he's doing in the next two stories, and he really pulls it off. He's not.
Among all of these elite actors and elite characters, he really held
Yeah.
his own. And we hadn't not we didn't really know Vigo as a household name before that. So incredible. And yeah, I think one of the things that I will say is that, you know, just to get a little bit more personal, as an immigrant kid, when you feel like you maybe do not belong in your, or you're trying to fit in, and you feel a little bit alien, or for anyone who felt alien, it doesn't have to be just immigrant kids. This vast and resilient and hopeful story really provided some sort of refuge and was very key to me feeling comfortable in my own skin, and try to like key to me feeling like I am free to discover who I am and who I'm going to be, you know. If, I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It is very much a story about hope enduring through times where it seems to be extinguished. Like, that's addressed in the text. And Sam gives a great speech about that in both the second book and the movie.
Best husband material, Samwise Gamgee.
Truly, because he really captures that feeling of where you think that whatever you do doesn't matter, but it's really important to just hold on, even if you don't have the strength or the will to do something else. Because ultimately, the story is about like the smallest actions. And I think maybe that's a reference to the size of the hobbits as well, but like the smallest people can have the biggest impact on the course of history. And it's about finding that resilience and very, very focused on relying on your friends, your family, your community
Found
to
family. Yeah.
exactly to help you through. Like, you're not going to get to the finish line yourself, and that's okay. And I think that's a very interesting read, at least my perspective that I have of the text within the movies, where it's like not really about rugged individualism, but rather the strength you can find in your collective, in your people. And it doesn't have to be one that you necessarily build because everything in your life is exactly the same. So it's such a good example of really like so many of the best tropes about like buddy comedies and found family and the cute banter between, you know, Legolas and Gimli, and finding that
Yeah.
common ground
Oh
while still
yes.
being true to yourself. There's a lot of like classic
Oh, you would
feel
die
good tropes.
before your stroke fell. Chills.
Yeah.
Oh, that
Right? Like, he jumped to save his
yeah,
friend. So it
yeah.
was no moment of hesitation. And that's how you feel about your friends sometimes. So it's a really nice manifestation within the fantasy realm of where you're literally like ride or die. Like, you're literally fighting someone for your friend. So very cathartic experience for anybody who feels, yeah, like you said, othered or desiring to be part of a community. So there's feel good vibes from a lot of different aspects of this, even though for most of the three movies there is a looming shadow over all of the characters.
Yeah, and you know, as you were talking, I just realized not enough people talk about this franchise and this story as something that covers the trope of found family. You know, like that fellowship is found family, even though at the spoiler, y'all, at the end of the first film, the fellowship has to disband. But the ties that kept them loyal and kept them bound to each other exist throughout the story, and kind of transcend this story really. And I feel like we talk about found family now in the year of our Lord 2022 all the time, but really, like, Lord of the Rings is one of the greatest examples. Quickly to cover, I think you had mentioned part of the your connection with the stories is now every year there's a holiday marathon of Lord of the
Mm-hmm.
Rings. You probably do only the original trilogy, as you mentioned. I tend to do
Yes.
all six. So, and that has been very established in my like my winter holidays. Our lunches will be planned. Lunches and dinners will be planned like around the movies. Um, any
Ah,
friends that come over and relatives that come over. It's just like it's just very set in the family tradition, and it's such a part of so many new friendships I've made since then. And then, yes, for me, with The Hobbit, with the second trilogy, it's a little bit different. While not as great, I acknowledge, not as great as the original trilogy. Very few things are. I do enjoy them. I do enjoy getting to return to these stories. I do enjoy, the amazing originals returning. Along with newer faces, as you mentioned, Legolas's dad with beautiful dad, we must say, this beautiful elf, hulking
Lee
figure
Pace,
of Lee
love
Pace.
you.
We love Ned from Pushing Daisies. And then getting a mini reunion of Sherlock and Watson, Martin Freeman and Benedict Cumberbatch, and kind of getting these new additions and getting to be in the story again was really special for me as well. And when these movies were coming out, one of my greatest, I think, one of the most enjoyable experiences during that time was Stephen Colbert doing the Hobbit week in the Colbert Report, where he
Oh
was just like
yeah.
losing his mind
He's a huge
at.
fan. He's a self-confessed, like self-professed Lord of the Rings. I would say the whole Middle Earth
Oh,
fan.
he
Yeah.
knows. For anyone who hasn't seen his takedown of one James Franco on YouTube, where James Franco tried to challenge him on some details of the Silmarillion, worth watching. Brings you a lot of joy.
Yeah, it's a really
And
aggressive kind of nerd gatekeeping that happens there, and um it is
Franco
fun to
looks
see.
scared. Like he's like, "What am I walked into?"
Yeah, I think he made the mistake of not really researching Stephen Colbert's level of interest in it, because there are people who are casual fans like me who appreciate and love the movies and could not tell you a lot about the lore because I haven't read all of the books in the Tolkien set in Middle Earth,
You
and
haven't read the appendices of Return of the King?
I haven't read any appendices, and I think I'm better off for it. um, but there are sort of casual fans, and then there's people who are like, this is what they did in high school because they didn't have the internet.
Yes.
So
Yes. And we accept all kinds of fans. No gatekeeping here. You're all, whatever your entry point was and whenever it was, we support it all. Fandom is huge and welcoming. Okay, so with our personal connections to this story, let's move on to the legacy and impact of these stories at large. So let's start with the box office because, we love data here. So according to Box Office Mojo, the highest grossing among the six Warner Brothers slash New Line Cinema, the subsidiary of Warner Brothers films, among these six films, the two trilogies, the highest grossing has been The Return of the King, the third movie, which came out in December 2003. All of them have been December releases: 2001, 2002, 2003, and then The Hobbit 2012, 2013, and 2014. Return of the King's worldwide gross was over a billion, which was unheard of, really, especially with this genre back in 2003. The second highest grossing has been The Hobbit and Unexpected Journey, the first Hobbit movie, which almost equaled the same amount of money as Return of the King. And this was largely because, the excitement, the buildup of getting to return after what, almost 10 years to this story. So yeah, this is the worldwide number. Domestically, and domestic, we should say Box Office Mojo and the industry defines as US and Canada. The Hobbit has been a little bit more tepid, as Raven will tell you, making consistently in the range of 200 million. And the Lord of the Rings movies did cross that 300 million threshold. So yeah, there's some box office data for you. In terms of, yeah, let's talk about ratings. And we're going to touch on this very little because ratings are pretty much lies. Not, I'm kidding, not really. We'll cover it. We'll cover.
Let's just say that they're not an objective evaluation of the product.
Yes, among many other things. There's some problems there.
Among many other things.
Many things. Yes. But we definitely want to keep a pulse on it. So let's say the numbers. All right. So the Lord okay, so the Hobbit. Let's start with the Hobbit. The tomato meter, the old tomato meter for the Hobbit has ranged from a perfect, this is a perfect summer day in San Francisco on the West Coast for you. The score has been high 50s to low 70s for the Hobbit trilogy, which is not good, y'all. Not good to see that.
But that is a perfect day in San Francisco. That is absolutely like an average day.
Weather-wise, very ideal. Critic score-wise on Rotten Tomatoes,
not so good.
You don't want that. Not a good look for them. Especially when compared to Lord of the Rings trilogy, which each one of them had a score above 90%. So big difference there. To put this in context, and I really love this quote, this is by Jay Hoberman, a critic of the New York Times. And this, I believe, is I'm not 100% sure on this, but maybe after the second movie came out, the second Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, Jay Hoberman wrote, "There is a good deal to be said about Peter Jackson's long-awaited and exceedingly long adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. Most of it bad." Wow, shots fired.
Oh no. I mean, like I said, I get the exceedingly long criticism 100%. And Peter Jackson also kind of went through, I don't want to call it controversy, but let's just say it was like a hot topic of discussion that he had shot The Hobbit at a different frame rate, and the 48 frames per second experience of viewing The Hobbit caused like physical discomfort to some people in the theater.
Interesting.
And
I didn't know about this.
If a movie makes you physically sick, like it has a physiological effect on you, I can see negative ratings. It's like 0 out of 10. I don't know what was happening, but I was vomiting through the movie. So I sympathize with that. But it was like a big shift from shooting on film to shooting digital with this new frame rate. And I think that's the reason that there was also just like an initial negative reaction, because you're taking things in visually and you just see Hobbiton and this familiar landscape not looking the way that you expect it to, and then you realize that the whole film looks like not other films because of this frame rate, and that creates this battle within your mind because you are combating this experience that's so different.
That's so interesting. I had not heard that, but I will say, if you put in a sexy dragon voiced by the honey, silky, warm bubble bath, whiskey soaked, warm bubble bath voice of Benedict Cumberbatch, listen.
Oh my.
I'm in. And then you have Thorin Oakenshield just singing that song in the first movie, and just, you know what? I'm in. I'm 100% in. Having said that, I think the wide consensus was that nostalgia wasn't enough to have people, I suppose, be as engaged with this franchise, with this second trilogy, as much as with the first trilogy. And maybe someday we'll go into like all that happened here, the failures that led to this like big chasm between the two trilogies. But for now, I think it's just good to understand that the second trilogy wasn't up to par for many reasons. So, moving on from the performance aspect, let's talk about the impact. So Raven, what would you say has been the greatest impact of these films in the entertainment landscape?
I want to approach this by splitting off the impact into a couple of different subsections. And the first one is, I think, related to the box office, which is where it shifted the perception of fantasy as a genre. I love that the simple data analysis that you can do on the box office data is that each movie in the initial trilogy made more than the last one, which meant more and more people were seeing it. And that is a feat rarely accomplished by a fantasy genre movie series, especially one that's based on property that was like almost 60 years old at the time. So it definitely wasn't like a hot new thing that people were becoming aware of. So the fantasy genre became reinvigorated and repackaged into something that was much more prestigious.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That word is
all,
key, prestigious.
yeah, because I would say definitely more so at the time than now. Having awards recognition was an important marketing tool. It was a way of legitimizing that your movie was of a certain caliber and a certain quality, and it was convincing people to come see it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is still used to that effect this day, which is why awards recognitions are sought after not just for rewarding people for good work, but also as the ability to like use that as a platform for launching like a whole marketing campaign of see this movie, it's so good, people want to give it awards. And there really hadn't been a lot of representation around fantasy. And with The Lord of the Rings coming out and being nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture for each one of them,
Huge.
eventually winning the Best Picture for The Return of the King, the ability for people to make money off of fantasy was not realized fully until then. It was like a special convergence time because the Harry Potter franchise was also getting started and making a ton of money. But the big differentiator was that this was decorated. They
Mm-hmm.
won Academy Awards for screenwriting and for production design and costume and
Score, no?
score.
Yeah.
Shout out to Howard Shore. He truly elevates the
Now and
experience of
always.
all three movies in the original trilogy.
Absolutely.
But that was the big change, was that it wasn't just monetarily successful, it was also prestigious. So that became a huge shift because if something makes money, they're going to figure out the exact formula and then repeat it. The Hobbit was just one of the many attempts to do that because you had the Chronicles of Narnia films that were also based on previous IP. You had Aragon also come out based on the novel by Christopher Paolini, who was, I think, 15 at the time when that book was published. So it to say that the
True?
text is raw.
Wow.
Yes, he was. I think he was 15 when it was published. So you can definitely tell that he was very influenced by both Star Wars and Lord of the Rings when you're reading the text. It's very evident. And I don't think he's made an attempt to really hide it. But that was turned into a movie in the 2000s, and the Chronicles of Narnia movies came out after the first trilogy, or I think during the first trilogy's run, possibly, or right after. My timelines are blurry. I think Chronicles of Narnia came out in 2005, and then the last movie in the trilogy was 2003. So yeah, that was done. But I think it was the presentation of just fantasy being an element of the genre that people who were not uber fans of fantasy or high fantasy before were not immediately turned off by the fact that something fantastical was present within the film.
Right.
I think it brings to my larger point that we've seen more adaptations on both film and television of the fantasy genre. Like, it's expected to go to a streaming service that caters to all genres, that there's going to be some content in there for fantasy, and that it's not just for kids, that you can
Yes.
enjoy them as an adult. And we've seen kind of the two lines I'm drawing for like money and prestige, where we saw the evolution of fantasy from the film to television pipeline with the Game of Thrones series and the Witcher
Mm-hmm.
series,
Mm-hmm.
the Shadow and Bone series. People who haven't read the source material or don't necessarily gravitate towards that when they're reading books or consuming media elsewhere are now inclined to just kind of turn it on and be like, oh, let's see what this is about. Let's see what everyone's talking about. And, Game of Thrones was an award winning television show,
Mm-hmm.
winning awards for things outside of the technical categories that normally fantasy would be racking up. Visual
Right.
effects, makeup, costume design, maybe, but it was winning awards for performances and for writing. That kind of critical applause wasn't given to fantasy genres before. And
Yeah.
Game of Thrones was insanely successful monetarily as well, and
It's
made a
coming
lot of
back, baby.
money. Yeah, exactly. It's coming back. And very similarly to Lord of the Rings, with a prequel that's set before the
Mm-hmm.
events of the television show.
Yeah.
And I don't think we would have seen this kind of success without Lord of the Rings kind of pushing the high fantasy through, because we've seen kind of the Harry Potter equivalent before, to some extent, like
Mm-hmm.
not super money making, but it had like a core fandom, very approachable. It wasn't hard to sell, like Buffy before it. It was about like a hidden world within the existing world. So you could get away with characters making like references and analogies to things that we know and we're aware of. And it's super simple to explain that logic.
Right.
But that accessibility isn't there with high fantasy. So it pushed away a lot of people from the genre before. But that all changed now with these films being so successful. So I'd say that's the first impact, in just, you see like a glut of things coming out in not just film and TV, but there's obviously the tabletop games of Warhammer 40K and Dungeons and Dragons.
Shouts to Henry Cavill once more. He loves it.
Again, yeah, I think he loves high fantasy. That's I love that his enthusiasm for the genre is really there. Um, and then of course, like all the video games that you see within high fantasy settings, you have the Elder Scroll Skyrim series, the OG World of Warcraft, New Elden Ring, and Bloodborne have elements that you see very reminiscent of the production within the Lord of the Rings movies. The effects that you talked about of the void that Frodo enters when he puts on the
Love it.
ring, I see those elements replicated in the video game. So it's like got a lot of those visual and aesthetic references that people just now associate with the genre as a whole. So you think of orcs and you think of elves and you think of dwarves, and you're automatically linking them back to what the original movies presented.
That is
So
such a good point. Yes. We
yeah,
picture faces of actual characters when someone says elf and dwarf, and I also think about fantasy before 2001. You know, it was Monty Python and Conan the Barbarian and
right.
Princess Bride. And then you see this, like, if you were to see like a graph throughout the years, it would just be like peak Lord of the Rings, and it just keeps going up and up. So like Lord of the Rings definitely seems to be a point of transformation in the industry. And yeah, what a great point, like that it just like ushered in this new era of high fantasy.
Yeah. And the amazing Guillermo del Toro did
Mm-hmm.
Pan's Labyrinth and
A
The
perfect
Shape of
movie
Water.
if there was one. Yeah.
What was that?
A perfect movie if there was one. Pan's Labyrinth. Oh my
Truly
god.
perfect in its story, its character development, its aesthetics. It's so memorable. And I think that both of these movies being up for critical acclaim is also another remnant of what The Lord of the Rings did. You know, you had heavy kind of dramas that were very personal or very much tailored to be showcases for the actors to do their acting in for best picture winners before. And with the Lord of the Rings snatching the best picture trophy for the Return of the King, I think that's where movies like The Shape of Water and Avatar, where they're just like,
Again, which Avatar?
that would be the James Cameron Avatar. I I don't believe M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender was considered for any awards from the Academy. Um, but you know, they weren't the usual sort of like it's just about the people, it's about the story. No, there's like a visual element, there's a perspective in it about the technical filmmaking, and you can't go back to 99 or 2000 and tell them that, you know, 16, 17 years later there's going to be a movie about a fish man fucking his caretaker that's going to win the Oscar for best picture. They're gonna give you meds and cart you away in the loony wagon. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that branches off into movies like Her by Spike Jonze, where again, it deals with a very esoteric way of looking at the concept of love and connection between two individuals, but you can suspend your disbelief because you've seen a lot more crazier things that
Yeah.
you
I
have
mean,
invested in.
Joaquin has a voice kink in that movie for sure. Good thing.
You better not judge. I'm talking
I don't,
about
no judgment here.
taking a bubble bath with Bumblebee Cabbage Patch.
It's true. It's true. We're the same, Joaquin and I.
Yes, you're exactly the same. Literally no differences.
Yeah, we're both doing Joker 2 with Lady Gaga as Harley.
I'm pumped. I am so pumped.
So excited.
I'm
It's going to be
definitely
great.
going to see this. 90% probably not going to be sober for it, but you know, I'm showing up to the cinema, baby.
Very few people are. It's a musical of the Joker, y'all. Like, come on. It's going to be amazing.
Another reason that you were able to feel fully immersed. And that's another thing that I want to talk about from the legacy, was just how it elevated the technical craft of filmmaking,
Mm-hmm.
right? With,
Second big impact.
yeah, just the VFX, the CGI, the prosthetics, and the technical aspects of the filmmaking around cinematography and lighting and blocking. It's so cool even now to see Ian Holm and Ian McKellen perform against each other in the Bag End set, where you see Gandalf as a character towering over
Mm-hmm.
Bilbo.
Mm-hmm.
But the actors themselves do not have that same height difference. And so they achieve that through both VFX and just practical filmmaking. And the VFX industry has changed so much, but the real impact from, I think, The Lord of the Rings was the advent of, or the adaptation of mocap in so many
Mm-hmm.
different projects,
Absolutely.
in particularly in video games, but also in film and television. I think Andy Serkis has like carved himself out to be all four faces of the Mount Rushmore of mocap, because obviously he performed Gollum and Smeagol for all of the movies, all six movies in the franchise. And he subsequently went on to do the rebooted Planet of the Apes franchise with Matt Reeves and performed as Caesar. Incredible performance by not just
Yes.
him, but by all the performance capture that they did with the other actors on there. Like, you're really like, wait, that's not an orangutan, that's just like a person in a
Yes.
suit. But the ability to still keep the emotion and the sort of facial micro ticks and everything that makes it believable as a performance is still retained, but transposed onto a digital character. And that's really cool, because it breaks a lot of barriers in what can be adapted on screen. And just the look of Gollum was incredible, but the performance is what people remember. The voice, the mannerisms, the dialogue, like he was his own person. And I think that between him and, I'm gonna have to give credit to another mocapped character, which is Jar Jar Binks from Star
Yes.
Wars, Your Menace is Phantomed, or I forget the title. Emmett Best performed the Jar Jar Binks character on
Hurts
set.
my soul. Hurts my soul. The Phantom Menace. Let's be real. But
Yes.
yes, shouts to Ahmed Best.
Yeah, and
Wonderful guy.
he was performing in the set with Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson, and you
It's
can
Master
see
Kenobi to
he's Ewan McGregor
you.
in that. I don't think he's Master in Phantom, so I
He's
think
not. He's a Padawan with the
he is a
little rat
Padawan,
tail.
and he's interacting with Jar Jar. I think the character of Qui-Gon Jinn is just annoyed with Jar Jar the whole time, which is really funny on second watch. But you can
Serves
see
as
that
the
they're having,
audience, yeah.
yeah, they're having like a real reaction to whoever's there in front of them. And when you see that removed in the subsequent movies in the prequel trilogy, you can see there's like a layer of visible confusion in the actors' faces, because they don't know what like they're not reacting to something that's really there.
Yes.
And so having mocap is super important in getting that authenticity in the performance. So I'm just happy to see that we're still keeping the concept of like two people reacting to each other in a scene, because when it's not there, it is possible to see the frustration in the performer because they don't know what they're getting and they don't know what they're supposed to be giving. So
it has an impact, right? As the audience, you want to believe that this is real, and when you see that the performance is lacking, you fall asleep, or you leave, or you switch to another streamer, right? This is a huge
yeah,
risk. Yeah, I often think about, when supporting actors, or like actors, leading actors, think they're supporting actors during an award that they win. It's just because that supporting actor has given so much to them to be able to react to something human, and it's so human to be able to adapt to circumstances around you. And that's so key to exactly what you're saying, to having mocap. And like, I've read so much about, for research of this pod, I've read so much about how Andy was on set for the original trilogy all the time, talking to
right.
actors, how he would capture some of the emotions, what he would say, and then getting their thoughts on this, and really having a that conversation between two people that allows them to like transcend something artificial between them.
Yes.
And with this, I will say, and I always say this, it's from The Good Place, from one of the greatest characters I've ever seen in television, Vicky from The Good Place, played by Tia Sarkar. She captures the essence of acting very well. She says at one point, I don't remember the episode, but she says at one point, acting is reacting, and reacting is pre-acting. But pre-acting, well, that's just being. So yes, Andy Serkis shouts to Serkis. What a legend!
Yeah. I mean, I like to think that this is like a subtle dig towards like the stories about you hear about obnoxious actors engaging in method acting and using that as an excuse to be terrible to people. Jared
You
Leto.
should.
Sorry, I had
Yeah.
something in my throat. Um, but I completely agree with that sentiment on another level because you wouldn't care about Frodo and Gollum slash Smeagol's relationship if it wasn't for the performances that Elijah Wood and Andy Serkis were giving each other. And even in that,
The softening between their
yeah,
relationship as the movies go
yeah.
on.
Like, yeah, the evolution of where, like, Gollum briefly becomes Smeagol again.
It's the
And
eyes. I mean, among
the
many other
eyes,
things, it's
the
just the eyes. Just
microtics, the smile,
yes,
the delight on his face where he realizes that he's like, I don't know, temporarily cured of his schizophrenia,
yes.
and the incredible potatoes, boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew scene where you see
And the
him
raw and
react.
wriggling fish.
Yeah, yeah, you see that great interaction between him and Samwise, and it's like two normal people having a conversation where they previously didn't like each other because of an issue, and now they're like trying to get over that, and you're trying to see the ice between you thaw a little bit, and it felt very real. It felt very relatable, like something you see kind of happening every day where two people who didn't get along are trying to get along
Yeah.
because they're trying to make amends with each other within the relationship, and it feels real because there was another person there that Sean Astin was saying this dialogue to, not just
Yes.
like speaking it out loud. So
Or like to a tennis ball and a stick, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's so
And
believable. It's so real.
yeah, and the details are not, it's not like the camera lingers on Gollum for too long, and he's very well integrated into shots that are like of wide angles or of panoramic shots of them moving through the landscape towards Mordor. So you're not focused on like trying to find flaws in the uncanny valley because A, he's not human, so he's not meant to look like a perfect representation of a human being. He's meant to
Mm-hmm.
look off and weird and unpleasant. But B, they also have him be very animated. Like he's full of motion. he's doing stuff. Sometimes he's in the background smeagling around, which is really fun to look at when you're
Sniggling
watching it
around.
like
Oh, one of my
repeatedly.
favorites is like, is this during when he gets the rabbit for Sam during the potato scene where he
Hmm.
like jumps around, like because he's so happy, he just like
Yeah,
kind of
like my dog.
yeah. Ah, it's so you forget for a second that this is not real, you know.
Yeah. He's integrated super well into all the environments with the lighting. He looks like quote unquote good in the daylight and the nighttime. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that making it look as real as possible, keeping him lurking in shadows to represent his personality and his character isn't just like a cool storytelling thing. It's also like a clever visual way of making this look real. So really, really good work done on the mocap and of the visual effects. The prosthetics are really good because it's all
100%.
practical for the orcs and the urukai. So there's actual performers under like pounds and pounds of makeup there. But I think the mocap has been like very much replicated. So I just feel that to me, because it's such a repeatable thing that I'm seeing across so many things, especially within making video games, because you don't have that restriction of only making like a first person perspective game now. You can have that third person perspective where it's really cinematic and you have performances by actual actors from, the stage and screen doing roles in video games because they're not losing any aspect of their performance in
Performance.
that capture. So you have people in, the Last of Us video game franchise that's very, very story driven, very character driven. And you feel for them because you're connecting with the person giving that performance.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's been a lot of great strides in that. So that's like a huge thing. And I this goes into like the incredible impact that Weta Digital, which is now Weta
Yeah.
FX, which is the company that Peter Jackson started to create visual effects for his movies, and how well they've been doing.
Yes.
They're a small shop coming from New Zealand, named after like a particularly
Insect, no?
resilient insect, actually, that's found in New Zealand. So it's like, yeah, it's I think it's just like a huge bug found in New Zealand. So they're like very proud of being Kiwi and very proud of representing the New Zealand film industry, but they've been
Yes.
doing so much pretty impactful work in FX. They're represented across multiple genres and different types of movies and TV shows. Um, they did a lot of early stuff in the 90s as well. Like they were doing work mostly for Peter Jackson's films. I think the most prominent thing that they had on their resume before the Lord of the Rings trilogy was for the movie Contact. Um,
Yeah.
and there's an incredible scene in Contact where like the young Jodie Foster, she's trying to save her dad and she's like running down a hallway, and then the camera pulls up and you see like it's not actually tracking her but following her reflection as she's like moving towards the bathroom medicine cabinet to grab something for her father. So it was like a VFX shot that wasn't in service of like doing something that
I
was
gotta rewatch. I don't
action or stunt
remember that.
related.
That's
Yeah, so
incredible. Yeah.
Weta has since done, all the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, obviously, but it has done things in both the Marvel and DC franchises. It
Yes.
also was involved with the Avatar series from James Cameron. They worked on the first movie, and
Oh, they
I believe
pioneered the
they're
technology underwater, right?
yeah, I
It was
mean,
Weta.
yeah,
Yeah.
the whole movie is mocap, so you can clearly tell that they're involved in that process for sure. And I believe they're also working on the subsequent movies as well.
Yeah,
But
one of the things is that Marvel, Weta is so important to Marvel, which I always assumed Disney would work with ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, which is George Lucas's baby. And
mhm.
thinking about it, Peter Jackson and George Lucas have so many similarities in many ways. Both have forwarded, not only good stories, but also just always had an impact in terms of like, I want to pioneer some new technology instead of reusing something that exists in order to tell this story in a better way. And there's some shortcomings on particularly one side, but we can draw a line in terms of like technology pioneering, right? We can like ILM was started in favor of like furthering the Star Wars trilogy, the originals.
Yeah.
So very interesting to see that. And Weta is playing a big role along with ILM in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with the upcoming Black Panther Wakanda Forever, the same underwater technology that was pioneered and perfected in the Avatar franchise is James Cameron Avatar franchise, just to be clear, is going to be employed for the character of Namor, and where that leads us is going to be somewhere amazing. So I'm very excited to see the stunning visuals there, and Weta playing a more prominent role in alongside ILM in the MCU.
Yeah, but it's nice to see what it doesn't just limit itself to high budget projects like that. They are still
They know their
partial
roots.
to I think they're definitely in touch with their roots, but they're still partial to like more about what the visual effects do for the story. So they are involved in like a lot of different projects that are, yeah, like niche genre stuff, but also not necessarily something that you would consider like a blockbuster in any way. They did the
I
VFX
wonder what you
for
mean by niche and genre.
I
Niche.
mean niche genre. You know exactly what I mean.
Oh, vampires.
No,
Teeny vampires.
I assume you're talking about the fact that they did do the VFX for What We Do in the
Yes.
Shadows,
Yes.
the 2014 motion picture by Taika
Yes.
Waititi and Jermaine Clement. Yes. Yes, they did. With the Lord of the Rings franchise, people found out about New Zealand. I hate saying that because, like, obviously New Zealand and its people have been around for so long that we shouldn't have to say that, like, people discovered it through it. But I definitely think that it was projected to the mainstream through that because
Through.
of the beautiful landscapes. Like, I don't think
Yes.
people understood that when they were watching people walk through Middle Earth, when they were watching the Fellowship take those
Yes.
iconic journeys through the mountains and the snow, that was New Zealand. And the
Yes.
idea that there was
It was
this
not
place.
Atlanta.
It was not. No, I think that was before when like all of the production
Moved to
um
Atlanta. Yeah.
moved to our whole old homestead, and that was all shot in location in New Zealand, and it was we gorgeous backdrop and everybody just wanted to go there. Of course, you and me being very savvy
We
Indian
knew about New
based
Zealand
consumers,
before
we surely
before it was.
did. We have seen many a choreographed Bollywood song set to the same landscape that like Gandalf was traipsing along with the
Yes.
hobbits and Boromir and
You put in a tulip strewn green field somewhere and
yeah.
throw in some people
It was
dancing.
definitely jarring to see like the same landscape where Hrithik Roshan was singing or miming singing and dancing, and then it's like Boromir is kind of making side eyes at the ring and Frodo is getting uncomfortable, and it's the same place. It's so weird. But I think they even like converted the Shire set to be like something that you can visit, right?
Yeah, still
Hobbiton,
to this day. Yeah.
it was
Yeah. Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's New Zealand was smart about it. They're like, yeah, you will take your money. We'll let you come visit. We'll let you experience
That's
this.
another thing, right? Like the greatest among all of these impacts, the greatest thing has been well, one of the greatest things has been just this light that they've shown on this wonderful, beautiful land of New Zealand, and how much talent has come out of that land since then, and how much attention we as a world, we as an audience,
Oh, shout
non-Kiwi
out to
audience,
Carl
pay.
Urban.
Yes,
Shout out to the
Billy
incredible Carl
Butcher,
Urban. Um,
now or
I
always.
did not I did not know what to expect when he was cast as Dr. Leonard McCoy in Star Trek, because I associated him with Xena Warrior Princess,
He crushed it. He crushed
another
it.
performance in New Zealand, and The Lord of the Rings, and I thought, how is he going to pull off irate Southern Doctor? And he did it. It was
There's
incredible.
very little he can't do. Love him. He's
Yeah,
great.
and between the other psychotic on The Boys, who's also a performer from New Zealand, Anthony Starr, and
I mean,
ooh,
like maybe a psychotic person in real life, but we'll just leave it there.
I
I
just
know.
have a huge affection for performers from New Zealand, especially given the quality stuff that they have been putting out for consumption for global audiences to see. I mean, there's of course the incredible duo of the Flight of the Concords,
Yes.
um,
One of the
Jermaine
greatest things
Clement,
I've ever seen.
and star of Return of the King, Brett McKenzie,
Yes. Yes. And Elf.
a beautiful elf. I think the only time I've seen Brett McKenzie clean shaven, but yes. And
Oh, yeah.
then other collaborators of uh, Jermaine Clement, Rhys Darby, and Taika Waititi, and the television shows What We Do in the Shadows and Our Flag
Our
Means
flag means
Death,
death, baby.
and a spin-off of What We Do in the Shadows called Wellington Paranormal, which you can also see on HBO Max,
Gotcha.
um, where they just follow along the adventures of the two police officers that randomly showed up to the vampire flat in the movie, and it's just like following them as they encounter different paranormal creatures and like solve cases around that. It's
I love those cops.
very New Zealand, very much like a New Zealand sense of humor. And I think that, yeah, that's been a big source of Taika Waititi's success. Like he did a lot of independent movies that were very much focused on his experience as a Maori man in New Zealand. Incredible work in both Boy and Hunt for the Wilder People.
Mm-hmm.
And also shout out to Sam Neill, who a lot of people don't know is
He's
from
Kiwi, yeah.
from New Zealand. Dr. Alan Grant.
Back in the third movie, back in Jurassic
Oh, he's
World
back,
Dominion or
baby.
whatever. Yes.
He's
Like he
cashing
never
that
left.
check. He's cashing that check. And yeah, it's just great to see like a really tiny place that a lot of people who are from there feel like they're excluded from the narrative of the world and from the narrative of like media and movie and TV. So I feel happy that they're getting their due and they're
Yes.
being authentically themselves without having to change or cater to specific tastes of people, because we are in a space right now where we can consume things from other cultures without having to explain it all within our head or ask like why are they like that and why are we like that. It's just a given, like people are different, whatever, we're gonna enjoy those differences. So um
I
I
love
think
that.
that's just a really long-winded answer to your question of like what the impact of the Lord of the
Fact has
Rings
been.
was.
No, this has been
But
great. Yeah, shouts to our Kiwi listeners. We are um, always eager to consume Kiwi content and very excited to see what's next. I do want to say, and listeners can correct us who've been to New Zealand recently if I'm wrong. But for a time, the New Zealand Promotion Board was actually, if you visited the country, the stamp on your passport would actually say, "Welcome to New Zealand, home of Middle Earth." So they may bring this stamp back into circulation with the new show coming. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe you and I will visit. Maybe the film board in New Zealand will invite us.
I hope so,
Uh,
especially after hearing this.
just declaring our love openly for New Zealand.
Like,
Um,
we're gonna show up to customs and they're like, "You're here for Lord of the Rings. We get it.
we
Have a
get it.
nice
Just
time."
walk on in. And then some data because we wouldn't be good product folks, product and tech
Yeah,
folks if we didn't
yeah.
always bring in data. I loved this. The according to the Matador Network, which is a travel website, they interviewed the general manager of Tourism New Zealand, I believe Sarah Handley, at the time of this interview, and she cited in 2012 when the Hobbit films debuted, approximately 150,000 people enjoyed the Hobbiton experience, which is the set experience. So a lot of
Yes.
people, visitors, did visit New Zealand for this reason, and that number has since grown to around 700,000 as of 2019. So this is just the recorded visits to Hobbiton itself. There's so many people. I remember back in college, there was a study abroad program, and part of the study abroad program, which was based in New Zealand, was just about, oh yeah, in your free time, we'll go to Mount Doom. In your free time, we'll go here and see the locations of the film. And literally, I know like everyone I knew who signed up for this study abroad program did it not because of the education, but because of Lord of the Rings. So, so the tourism aspect and the how much these movies have and the story has,
Yeah,
just
associated itself with like a national identity. That's so rare and so weird
opened the
because
doors for New Zealand and to us towards New Zealand, right?
yeah, my sympathies to people who are from New Zealand and don't want the association for Lord of the Rings. Believe
We
me,
are
we
very
get it.
well, this is not going to end anytime soon because, as we know with the new show, this is going to continue. And with that, let's transition to talking about Rings of Power, y'all. Rings of
Mm.
Power. All right, so I'm going to kind of go over some of the facts about what we know about Rings of Power, moving on from the impact of the the original movies and the Hobbit a little bit, maybe a little bit, and then moving on to what's to come now. So, Rings of Power. So this is going to premiere in less than a month now, September 2nd. Wow. Wow. Yeah, less than a month. We are recording this on August 13th, on a beautiful Saturday here in New York on August 13th. So yes, September 2nd, and this will be 8 episodes, and it will be a weekly model, which is the norm for Prime Video. It's interesting because they sometimes play with dropping 2 or 3 episodes for the premiere, like they did with The Boys. I believe 3 came out at once, and then it was episode 2, episode 3, just weekly after that. But let's pan back a little bit and let's talk about how this came to be and how this came to Amazon in the first place. So back in 2017, when the Tolkien estate auctioned the rights to the appendices, which is where we're circling back to appendices that I mentioned earlier in the episode.
Okay,
And
is
now
what Tolkien wrote like 80% appendices?
it's true. It's true. Honestly, not even kidding.
It's just like 20 minutes
I,
of story and then it's just MLA citations after that.
I'm listeners cannot you guys cannot see this, but I'm holding up my copy of Return of the King for Raven here, and literally half of it, I believe. Yeah, Appendix A starts at page 320, and this is a 500 page book. So
Kira, you have spent so much time in appendices. You need to become like a colonoscopy expert after this. Like, get out of the
ew.
appendix.
Wonderful. I know. But this is an engaging one, y'all. So let me tell about the appendices. So I'm gonna be completely honest, I did skip the appendices until it was announced that this show was kind of gonna be based more or less on the appendices. So yes, 2017, Tolkien Estate auctioned the rights to the appendices and the Second Age of Middle Earth as a whole, which is a thing. You can auction these rights. And the appendices do cover mostly the Second Age of Middle Earth. If people want to know more about this, I really recommend the really amazing piece in Vanity Fair by Anthony Bresnikan and Joanna Robinson that came out earlier this year, I think in March, that kind of goes over the history of how this has come to be. But in summary, these appendices, A through F, as mentioned, are part of the Return of the King book, and they cover different aspects. So Appendix A covers the history of the Númenórean kings, for example. Appendix B covers the Tale of Years, and these largely outline what happened in the Second Age of Middle Earth, how Morgoth or Melkor was defeated, and how his apprentice, a little dude you may have heard of called Sauron, vanished after the events. Um, this is at the beginning, I believe. Second Age picks up when this has already happened in the First Age. You know, the evil has been defeated, quote unquote. And for context, our events of the events that we've seen so far in both of the trilogies that exist have taken place in the Third Age, which is some thousand years in the future after the Second Age. So when this series picks up, the Rings of Power, we see in the trailers especially that Galadriel, while there is a sentiment among every character that, you know, days of peace are here, but Galadriel is kind of resolutely resisting the idea that evil is no longer. And yes, we see her go on sort of a search for the remnant of this evil and the followers that may still remain after the defeat in the First Age. Now, Amazon. How did Amazon get here? How did Amazon get this, right? Because this is such rich and yummy, delicious, profitable content. So our overlord, Space King Bezos, is apparently a Tolkien obsessive, and made sure, just absolutely had to make sure that the rights to these appendices came to Amazon when the estate sale was happening, or the auction. HBO and Netflix were among the bidders as well, but Amazon ended up getting this for just casual price of $250 million. And after
that's like
that,
what he has in his couch. Like that's couch
that's not
change.
even a joke.
Yeah,
he may carry that in his pocket, actually. Amazon then did some exploration into the story worth telling next. With these appendices, many were explored, including young Aragorn and Gimli, which I'd like to really see someday. That would be pretty cool. And many meetings actually took place, if the internet is to be believed. Many meetings took place with Peter Jackson, which is a great sign. Unfortunately, he has no involvement with the upcoming show. But the eventual showrunners, more or less newcomers, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, pitched an apparently breathtaking vision of the second age of Middle Earth, covering the forging of the 19 rings of power, secretly 20, which, I mean, this is where Horcruxes came from. Let's be real. This is the secret Horcrux as well. Like, let's be real. And this is the time that I do this, Raven. This is the time. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie.
10 out of 10
Thank you. I know.
only can be topped by Ian McKellen or Cate Blanchett.
Or yes, thank you. Or the actual black speech reading that of the inscription on the ring.
We do not speak the black speech.
We do not. It's true. It's true. I did at some point learn the black speech, though, the way that Sir Ian McKellen says it in Rivendell and really shocks Elrond. Yeah, I did. It was just
I was
masterful.
gonna say, did like Hugo Weaving pop up in your apartment and chastise you for uttering the black speech?
I wish, Hugo. Come to me. Okay, moving on to the story of the history of Rings of Power. So apart from the appendices, the story also borrows from, also holding up my copy of the Silmarillion here, also borrows from the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, and the History of Middle-earth. As an aside, if anyone is interested in reading or is rereading the Silmarillion, kudos to you. I have found this amazing podcast that is a companion piece to kind of the history and of Middle-earth and Silmarillion. It's called, really love it, would like to recommend Lord of the Rings Lorecast. Yeah, head over there if you want to have a companion to read the Silmarillion with. So back on track. The upcoming Rings of Power is planned to be a 5-season production. They've already committed. There's no waiting. They've committed to 5 seasons, and it's the most expensive television show ever made with a budget of at least $1 billion.
Billion.
A
With
billion.
a B.
With a B. Yes. That was the worldwide gross of Return of the King and The Hobbit. They've already invested that much. So they're, it's interesting. They've bought it for $250 million and they've already spent $1 billion. So they've got to have a guarantee, which we shall see, but it's more or less a sure bet, famous last words. Okay, so in this series, we'll see younger versions of, as I mentioned already, Galadriel. We'll see Elrond. We'll finally see Isildur and Elendil. Elendil, as we know, the famous war cry of Aragorn, in my favorite scene in the franchise, as he throws himself on top of the Uruk-hai. I will never stop talking about this. And we'll also see newer characters that are not Tolkien creations. So, for example, we'll see Arondir, an elf, which I believe is portrayed by Ismael Cruz Cordova. Yes, I think that is the character that plays Arondir, or that's the actor that plays Arondir. And then we'll see Elrond, young Elrond, being played by Robert Arameo. Galadriel is played by Morfydd Clark. A beautiful name, beautifully written, this Welsh name. And I don't know, Raven, if you've seen Saint Maud, this incredible horror movie from 2019, which Morpeth Clark stars in. Highly recommend. Love it.
Gonna check it
Um,
out.
yeah, I'm if I'm not mistaken, it might be on Prime or Hulu, one of those.
Better be on Prime.
I know. Get Morpheth, get all Morpheth content on Prime. And then we'll see Isildur played by Maxim Baldry, and then Elendil by Lloyd Owen. So solid cast right there. Um, One of the things I do want to call out is that there's not much lacking in the original trilogy except for diversity. And we must say that because one of the things that's been top of mind for creators this time around and top of mind for the showrunners has been casting much more diversity, having a diverse cast to reflect the world around us. And it's really heartening to see that in the franchise. And, you know, for example, we'll see a lot more non white elves. We'll see, as mentioned earlier, hobbit like characters called Harfoots that are described by Tolkien himself as being browner of skin. So, something to largely celebrate to see a reflection of the real world kind of come to this universe, this franchise. Some things to call out as we're talking about the the sort of investment, how far Amazon has gone to make sure that this series is successful. Howard Shore is back to do the theme. What a flex. Power move. He's just so part of the DNA of the story. So the theme is crafted by Howard Shore. However, the rest of the music is done by composer Bear McCreary. And this is kind of in line with what they're doing with Star Wars universe as well. They'll bring in John Williams for the theme and then give a newer composer the chance to create the rest of the music throughout the series or movies.
Yeah, and
Again,
Bear McCreary has a ton of credits in television
love it.
specifically.
Okay,
So
great to know.
he's definitely qualified for the score. Although I will say, like, I think Howard Shore has quite an extensive filmography. So he's done a lot of different types of score as well. So Bear McCreary kind of has the same type of filmography in the sense that it branches a lot of different types of
Love.
genres. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he can bring.
I love that. And hitting that Lord of the Rings sweet spot, it's filmed in New Zealand. It wouldn't be the same if it wasn't. Some details about the behind the scenes, or more behind the scenes. So the first episode is directed by Catalan Spanish director Juan Antonio Garcia Bayona, who most recently, fun fact, did Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. So this is the second one in the Jurassic
Oh,
franchise.
is that the one with the secret dinosaur auction happening like below the mansion in
I think
secret?
so. I think so. They've all blended together, but I will say that I love dinosaurs, so I watch them all
No,
multiple
but I
times.
heard this description. I have not watched the movie, but I have heard that there is a secret auction of like a T-Rex, and the T-Rexes are like in the bottom floors or maybe the basement of the mansion, and there's an old man living in the mansion completely oblivious to the fact that there are dinosaurs running around in his mansion.
That sounds familiar. Yes, that might be this movie.
I am hyped for these
Right?
episodes now.
So great. Yeah, they've got a great, actually, like these creators, the directors are, they've got a great lineup because the I believe the middle episodes are directed by Swedish film director Charlotte Brandstrom, who has directed episodes of The Witcher, Jupiter's Legacy, and The Outlander, which probably the sexiest show on TV, right? The Outlander.
Does that
When
mean
I
we're
went to Scotland,
getting does that mean we're getting sexy things in This franchise?
Maybe, perhaps, mayhaps.
I would like
There's
to
a very
see
young,
like
attractive
specific
cast.
dwarf reproduction because that was like a point in the second
I
movie.
know, I know, I know. There's one. Well, I don't know how true that is, but it seems like there are references to a more attractive form of Sauron that he puts on to like attract people and recruit people towards him. So we'll see how what they mean by attractive and where that goes. But the cast is young and hot, um, endless possibilities. And then lastly,
Because they're
we
young and
also
hot.
yes. Um, we also have, I believe, Wayne Yip will direct the rest of the last couple of episodes, and he is a British director, most notably connected to Doctor Who. So they've got a great lineup of people who've been immersed in the world of like telling these kind of similar stories and telling it well. Um, yeah, so that's a little insight into this story. Hopefully, now everyone is prepared and is super excited for the show, just like both of us. And, as mentioned, I'm personally really excited to see young Sauron, which I know there was after Comic Con trailer came out a couple of weeks ago, there was some conversation around a character in the trailer being the young Sauron. That is not the case. We will likely not see Sauron until maybe season two, or maybe the finale of season one. They'll keep that a secret for sure. So I'm excited to see that. We have seen in the trailer, however, his great influencer type marketing brand, which is the Great Eye. Like my guy is thriving. He knows.
Oh
He knows how to
yeah.
market himself. We do
He
see the eye pop up
is
a lot.
he is girl bossing his way to the top.
Yes, for sure. So yes, excited to see more of the eye. Excited to see actual Sauron. So yes, that was a recap of Rings of Power. Next up, the Amazon Prime Video strategy and how the product holds up against other streamers. Welcome into the cross dysfunctional section, what we're calling the cross dysfunctional section. This is where we dive deep into the tech, business, strategy aspects behind the service or platform or the streamer or technology. Today, no surprise, it's Amazon Prime Video. All right, let's start with the tech of it all. With Amazon Prime, Raven, tell us a little bit about Amazon Prime Video, its history, some content highlights. Take it away.
Yeah. It's been quite a journey for the streaming service because the intent definitely wasn't to create a streaming service at the very beginning. It's really evolved. And what started as Amazon Instant Video eventually became Amazon Video and is included with your subscription to Prime, which is
Mm-hmm.
a service that Amazon provides across essentially all of its consumer base. So Amazon as a business has its finger in many pies. If you're working in tech,
You don't say.
if you're working in tech, you most frequently encounter Amazon through the Amazon Web Service, which
Yes.
is a web hosting service that provides the support for hosting what people call cloud services, which means that
Mm-hmm.
you are not, as a customer of Amazon's web services, you are not hosting the physical servers that contains all of your application's information. So if you are, for example, creating an app that is akin to like a dating app or uh, e-commerce application where you're buying things from a particular product or service, the information around what you're selling, your prices, your customer information, stuff like that in your database, they're hosted within those servers, and Amazon Web Services comes along and says, we can do that for you. We can simplify all of that. So that is a huge chunk of how they make their money. It's actually a surprisingly big chunk to people outside of tech who assume that most of the money comes from what Amazon is mostly known for, which is an online e-commerce platform themselves.
Yeah.
But they're making a significant amount of money in AWS. I believe AWS has Netflix as a customer.
I think so too. I think if you go on AWS webpage, it says Netflix on like the bottom as
It
one of the
does.
customers.
So Netflix is still giving Amazon its money because you are logging into Netflix on your phone or your computer or your smart TV, and you're accessing Netflix's database of content, which is hosted in an Amazon server. So,
Fingers in all the pies.
yeah, just think about that. And then, of course, like Amazon's focus again is like getting people to sign up with a Prime subscription. I think I did that back in the day because I used to get my college textbooks from Amazon Prime, where it was significantly cheaper to do that than to go to
On Amazon Prime, yeah.
the on-campus bookstore.
Even reselling on Amazon, right?
Yes,
Was much better than
yes.
like the $10 you got for like a $400 biology textbook from your campus bookstore.
I'm sensing personal trauma here.
I'm traumatized. I remember this specifically when I tried to, I believe it was introductory biology. I tried to resell it, right, to the campus bookstore. And it was like $400 or something. And they said, okay, I'll take it for 10. And I went, dollars? So yeah.
But at that time, when we were in college, I'm sorry to report that there was no Amazon Instant Video because we are older. And streaming in itself was very much restricted to either the official websites of the networks that were hosting the last few episodes of their currently airing TV series for you to
Okay,
watch or
so
catch
I
up on.
believe I have very vivid memory of The Riches on Hulu. I don't know if you ever
Yes.
watched it. Riches, like, this is how I found out that, well, Netflix was pretty big or coming into its own after its
They were
the
still
DVD
very much
service.
associated with the DVD subscription
DVDs,
model.
yeah.
Yeah.
But they had just started their streaming. The word of streaming wasn't that big. You didn't use it all the time. But Hulu with Riches, and I remember the online video platform that I used the most, surprisingly, was Comedy Central videos because of shouts to the Daily Show and
That is
Colbert
not a
Report.
surprise. Honestly. I mean, A,
Yes,
because I know you, but
my
B, if you're
account.
in college, you are watching Comedy Central. Like,
Yes,
that is
yes,
for late nights. 100%.
yes. South Park. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was yeah, and then I guess YouTube was also very, you could upload anything onto YouTube, wasn't very regulated, so that was a
No, they
video
did not have the same copyright claim system that they
they
have
do
now.
now.
Yeah.
So yeah, streaming was not a thing. Not a thing.
Yeah, we're so
This is
ancient. We
this is
remember pre-Google YouTube. So I think the landscape of streaming definitely was pioneered from Netflix. So Amazon was playing catch up very
mhm.
much because, like I was saying, at the time, the three networks of ABC, Fox, and CBS converged together for Hulu, which is now ultimately now owned by Disney.
Disney baby, yeah.
Yeah, but at the time, oh, there was NBC as well on Hulu. I do remember that
Okay.
because I remember watching 30 Rock on Hulu quite
Interesting.
avidly.
Early on, okay.
Yeah, very early on. This was like the second and third seasons. I do remember like an amazing convergence of when like the rant that Christian Bale had from the Terminator movie set that he was on got spoofed by Tracy Morgan's character, Tracy Jordan, on 30 Rock. So they had like a little extras video entitled Tracy Goes Off, and it was on Hulu. It was the way that, yeah, you could consume the very latest, like maybe the most current one and two episodes before that of like all of the series you're watching. But I think it started with the ability to be like a competition for on demand video. Basically, you pay for watching movies that you missed seeing in the theaters, or like older movies, and
Mm-hmm.
eventually pivoted to including concurrent programming. I began with a deal with the Viacom branch of network. So it was like a lot of reality television, but also Comedy Central and MTV being two subsidiaries of Viacom. So there was like a lot of their content initially on when it was called Amazon Instant Video. And then it kind of built from there, working with other networks. And I think, for the lack of a better word, loaning out their television series and films to be watched on Amazon Prime,
Mm-hmm.
because they were competing furiously with Netflix, who at the time had a lot of big content from a lot of different places. People were watching The Office, people were watching Friends. I was watching Heroes, just me.
Yes.
But there was also, I remember, a lot of people watching shows from the CW, like The Vampire Diaries and Gossip Girl, so that they
On
could catch
instant
up
video?
on
Interesting.
Netflix.
On Netflix, yeah, yeah, yeah. For sure.
And they were doing it like to catch up before a new season, or just like having it play on their computer while they're doing other work. So I definitely saw the upswing of streaming culture come in, because you may not have time to catch up with TV shows as they're happening when you're living in a communal living space like a
Yeah.
dorm.
Yeah.
And unless you've got big money, you can't buy TiVo or DVR.
Oh, and
I think it
this was
was
the time that
TiVo at the
TiVo was
time.
like was about to just plummet. But yeah, this was the height
Yeah.
of TiVo.
Yeah. And then was eventually replaced by DVR. Um, but yeah, you didn't have those options. So like streaming was becoming more and more popular. And I think YouTube culture was also just generally becoming more
Mm-hmm.
and more popular. People were like sharing YouTube links and clips. Like you said, it was the Wild West. There was no content
Yeah.
regulation on there. So people were
It's a
uploading
dangerous
like
time.
whole ass episodes of stuff. I have many fond memories of seeing what people call AMVs, anime music videos. So there was a lot of exposure to different kinds of content because of streaming services, and Amazon really wanted to get into that. And
Interesting.
around 2015, it kind of pivoted to just being called Amazon Video. Like they were, I guess, realizing that the whole idea of watching,
Instant video, yeah.
yeah, they streaming was becoming extremely normalized. Like binge watching had entered sort of the mainstream vocabulary of everybody. So again, in competing with Netflix, that is also around the time they started to pivot to some original
No, I was
content
gonna
as well.
say this is probably the time that I started watching Amazon content and paying
Yeah.
attention to it because it wasn't like I'd never. I don't think I'd ever fucked with instant video ever. Like, I was like, what is this?
No, because it was showing a lot of content from like television channels that you would get in your premium cable package that you may not necessarily have watched before.
I was thinking about the Amazon content and original content. In the last few years, like, I've always thought of HBO as the prestige, is the height of prestigious content. Like, they know what they're doing with creators, with actors, they have access into the depths of the industry, and they always create something that's incredible and always engages me. Then I looked at how much I've been watching on Amazon Prime Video in the last few years, like with Underground Railroad. That was, Colson Whitehead novel, but also Barry Jenkins just like coming in to like direct
Mm-hmm.
this from like fresh off of his Moonlight Oscar win. Then we have Good Omens, which is like such a pleasure to watch with David Tennant and Michael Sheen. Also, Frances McDormand, I'd forgotten she was in it, and Neil Gaiman, another flex. Neil Gaiman, another show happening right now, The Sandman, highly recommend. Man in the High Castle was one of the first ones, right? That was one of the first, I believe, bigger shows of that was an original from the streamers.
Yeah. I think that one definitely got a lot of attention because it was a genre specific
Yes,
outing, like a revisionist history. But I do remember a couple of others. The primary one being Transparent or
yes. Won
Transparent,
awards
however,
early on.
it did. It won a lot of like critical acclaim and very groundbreaking in many different ways, um, considering the fact that there really hadn't been a very concerted effort of like sympathetic portrayal of trans people in American media. So showing the
Yes.
journey and even having trans actors as part of the cast is,
Pretty revolutionary, yeah.
yeah, very revolutionary. There was also Mozart in the Jungle. um
Yes. Gael Garcia Bernal.
that's right. Without his better half Diego Luna.
Oh, he's coming in
But
Andor.
he is, yeah, he's getting his streaming checks too. But they were definitely more like, I would say, smaller scale shows, like very personal kind of stories that they had. And then started branching out. I know that they have this television show called Bosch, which I have seen parodied as like your
A
dad's
dedicated
favorite
fan
show that you have
base.
never heard about. And
Yes.
I do get that vibe. It's definitely going for like the CBS procedural, like TNT dad
They
crowd.
are going for the dad crowd because they always have these like military, just like these like retired soldier junk, like this just like crime shows, a crime and like these spy shows. Like
Mm-hmm.
now there's a Terminal List is on, and then we have Jack Ryan's. There's so many Jack Ryans that are also on
Yes,
Amazon.
yes. So I think that's like what I was trying to say, is that they started to get bigger and bigger with the scope of their stories, right? Like it began with like a family drama and a procedural, and then it began to go into The Man in the High Castle, and then going into adaptation of existing IPs that people are familiar with, like not only Jack Ryan, but also um, the movie Hannah, which originally starred
Yeah,
Saoirse Ronan, and
I
and
remember that.
that was adapted into a TV series with completely different actors, but it was like the same characters, the same story was just expanded into a TV series, similar to like 12 Monkeys and other examples. But then they did The Boys. um,
Oh, The Boys.
yeah, they
Invincible, in the same vein as the Boys, Invincible
yeah, from
being,
from
yeah,
comic books again.
yeah.
It's like they find elements of what works in other places and then they take it. It's
Yes.
very interesting to see. Obviously, with things like Jack Ryan and Hannah, I was like, oh yeah, we're taking like previously made stuff and just kind of making it again here and owning the entire canon, like very similar to like the Lord of the Rings. Yeah, those things exist, whatever, we're just making our own version of
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Speaking of like these models, like they're a tech company first, right? They've come in from many streamers, not all, many streamers, they've come from the perspective of approaching tech first. So they are very dedicated to being agile and observing what works and what doesn't and trying out different strategies. So like yeah, they're going, you can see they're going on to these like
Yeah,
models that learning from the previous and learning from like other their competitors around them. Very in a very nimble and agile fashion, I must say.
they have the ability that I think other streamers don't, to understand their consumers' habits outside of just media.
Hmm. We'll get to this later, but yes, they have
Yeah,
fingers
I'm
in all the
I'm I'm
pies.
just saying that if there's 100 dads buying Glock holsters on Amazon in a day, they know that they have the audience for like TV shows that portray the CIA in a positive light. Let's just,
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, do I want to say propaganda? I really do want to say propaganda, but at the same time, it's like they know what their audience wants. And they're not actually trying to get other people to appreciate this media either. It's like you can watch it if you want, you can skip it if you don't want to, because it is a streaming service. You can choose what you want to see.
Yeah.
But at the same time, resources are limited. I don't know. I mean, I don't know about Jeff Bezos's resources, but Amazon's resources are limited. So they
They're
can't
not
keep
limited.
all their TV shows all at once. So you are sort of like, oh, okay, where are they getting these numbers from? Because it's not just about what's being viewed on the platform, it's also all this other data that they get to collect on your geographic location, your age, and your consumption habits in like material things.
Yes. And any before we move on to some like data insights around Prime and uh, comparison to other streamers, any other insights uh, do you have to offer here?
Yeah, I think that if we're looking at the microcosm of streaming services and their general performance within the entertainment industry, it's not as prominent as Netflix's output. I think that from an awards perspective, Transparent got some early recognition. And then in my memory, without actually looking through analytics, but just from a hazy perception, the next thing that's the most successful awards wise is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Yes.
Yeah. And from films, I think that they've done okay. They've gotten some accolades for The Big Sick, Manchester by the Sea. They were up for Best Picture this year for Licorice Pizza, and not as aggressive with their for your consideration marketing campaigns, because it is
Hmm.
about really like doing that campaign and getting those nominations. It's not necessarily always merit, but it doesn't seem to be as much of a priority for them as Netflix, because they're making quality content. I think that my overall perception is that either it's really good or it is something that I'm just indifferent to because it's like blandly inoffensive. I I haven't seen an Amazon original, and maybe I haven't explored the library or the catalog yet. And for someone listening to this who has a suggestion, please let me know because I love trash, but I haven't seen anything that's like outright awful where there have been outputs from Netflix, and maybe it's because of the scale of content and how much stuff they're putting out there, but there's a lot of junk that is Netflix originals. Whereas with
Mm-hmm.
the current banner head of what I see from coming from Amazon, I'm like, it's either really good or it's fine.
Yeah, that's an interesting assessment. It's also, I think this is the streamer that I spend the least time on. In part, I have an Amazon Fire TV, right? Like you can see it behind me, and I do not specifically click on the app of Prime Video like ever. I think it whatever
Mm.
it promotes to me from its own library is probably what I'm in on the homepage of like with other streamers on there is probably what I'm interacting with and clicking on Prime Video the least. And
Mm-hmm.
we'll get there later
Oh
on in
yeah,
terms
yeah,
of
yeah.
okay, with that, let's get into data a little bit. Now, this is according to Park Associates Video Services, which is an organization that covers the future of video. Yeah, it's a whole thing. They have a convention coming up if people are interested. Statista
Well,
datasets. Also, I looked at Statista datasets, which is up in the air how accurate they are. I also read Amazon press releases, which is fun stuff. And then some insider intelligence articles, and then markets US compilations of data sets as well, which has been really enlightening, actually. Shout out to all the product heads out there. Y'all live for data. We live for data. Love it. Okay, so
yes.
these are generally from 2020 and 2021 because 2022 is still, up in the air.
In
The
progress.
in progress. Prime Video has about 200 million subscribers in comparison to the top. And when I say Prime Video, it's Prime service overall, right? Because they don't differentiate
Yeah,
that
because you
for the
get it
most part.
automatically. Yeah.
Right. You can subscribe to it separately for like $9.99 or $8.99 or something, but very few people do. In comparison to the other top 7 streamers, so the landscape is only right now looking at 8 streamers. The other top 7 streamers, Netflix, obviously, we have to talk about Netflix, is hovering right now around 220 million. But, that might be different now due to the hoopla this year, hoopla that's happening with Netflix over at Netflix and their wonderful decision making team. I don't know what's happening over there, but
It's
sending
a
you
guy
love
and a
and good
dartboard.
vibes.
It's
Yes.
just one guy and a dartboard and a prayer.
I guess we'll do crackdown on password sharing. I have no idea how, but let's start in Central American countries first. Ah, we are sending you a lot of love, Reed. We are sending you a lot of love. So yes, around 220 million for Netflix, and that is they are still at the top of the game in terms of subscribers. Disney Plus has been sitting pretty at about 130 million. Well, as of 2 days ago, Disney Plus announced that they added, they've I guess exceeded the number of additions at least in subscribers as compared to Netflix this year. So Disney so far this year, this is August, they have added 8 million subscribers so far this year, while Netflix for the first time since their since in 10 years since the birth of their service, they have lost 200,000 subscriptions. Not a good look for our guys at Netflix,
And is
but
this global when we're talking
this is
about the number
global.
of subscribers? Okay, so this is from like all countries that
Yes.
they're supporting in.
Yes. And this 8 million, I'm not 100% sure, but this 8 million might actually be just in US and Canada that they've added Disney Plus this year, which is very, very interesting. But, to be expected with all the original shows that they've released, during the
Yeah.
pandemic. They pivoted very fast to TV, from movies to TV.
Yeah.
Now,
Disney Plus also has like a strange distribution model because Disney Plus isn't available everywhere. It's like Hotstar in some
Hotstar,
places, and
yeah.
um it operates instead of Hulu in some places.
Yes.
There's no Hulu available in those countries, so it's Disney Plus. So it's like very weird to see like promos of like Pam and Tommy on Disney Plus.
On
It's
Disney
like,
Plus.
wait, what? But yeah, that's
Yes.
so there's some weird kind of numbers around that because there's also Hulu and Disney Plus, which are like two separate services in
ESPN is Disney property, so they
yeah.
own a lot of sports as well. So
Hmm.
very interesting. And then third, we have HBO Max, which is one of the, if not the newest service. Maybe Disney and HBO came out at the same time, but one, no, I think HBO came out later. Um,
Yeah.
they come out at 77 million subscriptions. Pretty cool. So they're third. Hulu, which we know is more or less a Disney property, but operates as a different streaming service for now. They have 46 million subscriptions. Now, rounding out the list, we have in the sort of bottom tier, let's call it, we have Apple TV and Paramount Plus, Oscar winning streaming service Apple TV with Coda, and Paramount Plus, both of them at 40 million subscriptions. For Paramount, let's face it, half of them are probably just driven by Top Gun franchise, Top Gun Maverick. The whole just they're enjoying their time right now because of
I
the.
I have to disagree. I think it's the Drag Race franchise.
It might also be Evil. I really love that show on Paramount. What a weird show. I love it. People are having so much fun on that show.
And
And
not
it's
as
like
much fun
as
as
Drag
the
Race.
Drag Race franchise.
That I can agree with. But it's
I
like
di-
one of those things when it's under the radar, you know what I mean? It's still like Evil is such a good show and it's still under the radar and more people are discovering it. So they're getting away with a lot of things
they get to be
that
weird.
they get to be real weird and I'm like, what am I seeing? So that's been yeah, Paramount, it's up and like I'm very surprised by Paramount. While the
So
UI we
it's
can talk about is not up to par, but the
it's
content
like
is.
procedural dads, Star Trek fans, Drag Race fans, and
Oh, Lower
maybe
Decks is on Paramount, no?
and
Yeah, the new one.
the TV shows Discovery and Picard are also on
Star
Paramount
Trek.
Plus. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, for Paramount was CBS Plus before, something like that, right? CBS Plus before
CBS All Access.
All Access. Yes, that was quickly disbanded.
Fun fact, Paramount initially was the distributor and producer of the first Iron Man and first Captain America movies.
That is a
Bef-
fun fact. What happened there, Paramount? You needed to hold on to that. They were like these
well,
third-rate heroes. We're not
well,
into them.
but it is insanely
Before,
jarring to see their logos where you're like, oh, right, yeah. So
mm-hmm.
I think they did like the
Yeah,
first um, Thor movie as well. Like everything before the Avengers, the first Avengers
the
movie
first
was like,
Avengers. So everything pre 2012.
yeah, it was
Interesting.
distributed by Paramount. It's crazy.
Incredible. And then at the bottom of the list, we have Peacock, which is also one of the newest services. But single-handedly also probably in business because Gen Zs are now discovering The Office, and The Office is like literally melded into the subscription model of Peacock, which I know Raven loves to talk about.
I love that they started their subscription model like that. I think it's moved to a more common subscription model now of like a basic and a premium subscription. But when it was being rolled out, it had like a subscription plan that was built around how many episodes of The Office you could watch.
But what a brilliant strategy for rollout, and on, if we look at it from the evil
Yeah.
genius point of view, like they studied after 8 episodes people are like locked in for life. Before, if you don't finish, if you're just on episode 5, you don't tend to get to season 3, for example. So they knew the exact episodes where they needed to lock in. This is where you need to pay. These are free, but after 8 you have to pay. And after 8 you are just kind of, you want more, you're like, oh my god, I can't stop now.
And I love that they got that data probably from Netflix.
Yeah.
Right before
they did.
yanked it away from them and said, this is our toy now. You can't play with it anymore. But before that, we're going to see like viewing patterns of which are the most skipped episodes, which are the ones that people just jump into, rewatch. It's crazy. But they did
It's
all
incredible.
of that. They leveraged Netflix platform and they said, okay, we're doing this now.
Yeah, give it to us. So yeah, that is the list in terms of subscriptions. We see, we basically see Netflix at the top, Prime Video or Disney and Prime Video hovering around second spot. Prime Video, it could be argued, is actually ahead of, in terms of subscriptions, ahead of Disney Plus, but I think Disney Plus is like a pure streaming service versus Prime counting 200 million subscriptions with all of its service, right? And then we have, right, HBO Max, Hulu, Paramount, and then we have Peacock. So moving on to just some other data insights, which I found really interesting. Amazon revenue was over 386 billion in 2020. It was around 450 billion in 2021. Like, this is, now if you compare to just like, the spending money that they hashed the on Lord of the Rings, which is 1 billion, it's nothing compared to their revenue. So now it's starting to make a little bit more sense that the most expensive show ever made is just, nothing for them.
I
Prime
would
Video
love
channels.
to hear Christopher Smalls talk about this.
Okay, so as a streaming interface, as a streaming service, what is it doing right? What is it doing wrong? Right off the bat, I will say one of the things that I really, really love about Amazon Prime Video is what they call the X-ray feature, which is largely powered by the IMDb acquisition, which now they've recently, like, IMDb was acquired early on, like I think early 2000s. They just didn't know what to do with it. And now they're really starting to cook with it, with like, kind of rebranding IMDb TV as Freevee now, which is not half bad. It's a pretty low tier streaming service, but it's free. And you can get pretty good movies on there. Anyway, so this X-ray feature, I think incredibly cool. So you pause a scene and you can see what actors are in this scene, including what music is in this scene as well. Like, so the song title and the
That's so helpful.
I know, because I paused so much to be like, who's that actor? Let me Google him. And you look up the entire cast list, and then you get up to get popcorn and never return to the show.
Oh no. I love the fact that you can see the music because there
Yes.
is that wall that I have hit in my 30s where I am not as good as discovering new music. And it helps me to see music in media and enjoy that and say, I like that. That has good vibes. And I want to know what that is. And instead of rewinding and like using my phone to record the audio to see like what song it is or what artist it is, it actually gives you that information. And sometimes even I
Love
think
that.
depending on what device you're viewing it on, even links it to the Amazon Music
I think it
equivalent.
does.
So you
They
can,
know what they're doing.
yeah, um you can purchase the physical copies of their music, something I definitely recommend for all artists, or you can just like add it to your playlists.
I will say, so this X-ray feature, right? Like, it's so interesting because in this day and age, everyone is fighting for our attention and time, and they've just like perfected this model of like, what is this path of customers engaging with us when they look at when they watch something with us? What is their path, at different points? And in one click and max 2 clicks, you're able to ensure more engagement with the content, because when you're like, oh yeah, that's that actor that I knew from, that's Maxim Baldry that I've seen in this content. By the way, if you click on the X-ray, you can see what other properties the actor has appeared on as well, so it kind of jogs your memory. And this is just one click away, and it's so helpful in kind of increasing the number of completers. And Netflix calls divides their customers into starters and watchers and completers. So starters are the customers who watch 2 minutes of your content and then likely don't return. Watchers are people who have watched 70% of your content, and then completers are 90% and above. They've engaged with 90% and above of a particular piece of media. When you start to add like these little features, these little like X-ray helps you kind of move the
Mm-hmm.
needle from, right, like being a watcher to a completer, really ensuring
Switching
like you don't.
cohorts, as we call it in
Yes,
product. Yeah.
in the biz, it's very like, for me what happens is like, it's very, I will pause something and then I'll start to check my text messages, or I'll get like, tea or coffee, and then I'm like, all right, like maybe I'll switch to something else, or maybe the TV turns off after like 10 minutes and I'm like, all right, I'll just take a walk outside. It's very like, you have to make sure the attention remains focused. And this, not only the attention piece, right, like it does add to like, I am now more engaged with the content because I know the name.
Yeah, I did want to point out that because you were talking about the IMDb acquisition as well. And I normally consume Prime videos on my laptop. So I don't have to pause the movie. I can actually just leave my mouse in a hover state in the
Oh, love
player
that.
and it
Yeah.
shows up. But what I've also noticed is pieces from the IMDb trivia and goofs section showing up in the X-ray.
Oh my god.
So
Oh my
it's
god,
if you're
right?
like that
That's
invested in the movie sometimes, which is like super fun. Like there's a lot of things that I watch where there'll be like a goof where it's like you're watching some historical period piece and they'll be like, this is an error because the thing that they're using hasn't been invented yet. And you're like, ha, that's funny. But it also
adding to
gives
your
you trivia.
engagement with the content. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it gives you trivia where they'll tell you, oh, this wasn't scripted or this was originally supposed to be this way. Or there's some trivia that pertains to a specific scene or a specific plot point where the trivia appears. So somebody is going in and integrating the individual trivia and plot points to like moments within the film.
Ah, is that's incredible. I don't think I knew about the trivia. I
Mm-hmm.
maybe have not seen that on the bigger screens on my, because I usually
Yeah,
just watch
it's quite
it on my
possible that
phone.
it is like platform restricted in that, it depends on what device you're using to watch the video on will show you different things. And I
Yeah,
think the laptop is the one that they make the most feature rich because they know that it is the platform that supports like the e-commerce and going to IMDb and all the other
exactly.
things that are like the jump off point for that X-ray feature.
They're more prepped infrastructure wise to do that as well. So,
Yeah, they're ready.
yeah.
They're ready for your distracted ass to have 5 tabs open.
Yes,
So
yes.
you're like looking up shit and you're half watching something and then you're like Googling videos of Anthony Starr on Xena Warrior Princess while The Boys is playing on the other tab. So
It's low effort, high impact. It's
yeah.
incredible. Speaking of IMDb, I must say that on the TV, at least on my TV screen, which is a Fire TV, I do see the IMDb ratings next to Prime titles show up. Actually, next to all titles because it's a Fire TV. So they're really, I mean, we're going to talk about how much
Interesting.
IMDb ratings
Because
actually matter.
I have Google TV and
Yeah.
it shows Rotten Tomatoes ratings.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, they're pushing the IMDb agenda, and I mean, to me, that doesn't really do anything, unless it's like an alarming, like if I'll see something that's like 3.7 on IMDb, honestly, I'll still click on it because I'm very interested to
Yeah,
see
it
what
could be
happens.
amazingly funny.
I know.
Unintentionally, but yeah.
Um, Through Prime Video, you can subscribe to Showtime and Stars or PBS Kids, so like
So did they
bigger.
reinvent the cable packet?
I mean,
Because that's what it
honestly,
kind of
right?
sounds like.
It's very so yes, but it's also like they have access into like these like niche services, which I would never know what
What do you
I
mean
never would
by
have,
niche?
like BritBox. I would have never known there
Yes,
was a
you're right.
service
British
dedicated
people
to
are
horror.
definitely a very small niche.
Like just if you just have an interest in seeing like there's like British shows from Sky or BBC, you subscribe
Yeah,
to
if you're a
BritBox.
real Benedict Arnold, you surely can watch English people. Because I don't know if there's a ton of like Scottish, Welsh, or Northern Irish content on
On
BritBox.
BritBox. I do not subscribe, so I cannot attest. Maybe a listener
That's
can tell
right.
us.
We subscribed once, never again. Am I right?
um, then we have Shutter, which love as a standalone service. I have since subscribed, but I found it through Amazon Prime, a horror dedicated service.
Yeah,
Um,
that's owned by AMC Studios. Or, sorry, AMC
yes,
Networks. That's right.
AMC. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
good for them. This is a good service for them. And then Sundance Now, so like smaller services as well. So they'll do like they used to have. I used to subscribe to HBO from before HBO Max's launch. I used to subscribe to HBO from Prime Video, but that has since ended. And this is very interesting to look at this because they're the only players doing this. I think Apple TV comes a little bit close because they do have they do have not integrations, but they can serve as like sort of a hub towards other
Yeah, people are
things.
still watching movies on iTunes, so there's
Yes,
some
it's very
connection.
Amazon is just like so set up to handle all of these integrations. Like it's not a big deal, right? Like
Probably because they're
so
hosting all that content anyway on AWS.
right,
Like, people
exactly.
don't
And
think
so
about that, but it's like all these different servers and services that have to communicate with each other when you're building tech products. If you're already building everything that has to talk to each other, it's probably really easy to build like a conglomerate because you already own the individual pieces.
it's just like such a smart strategy to add as they build out their original content with Amazon Studios to keep customers glued to one service, right? Like you have a Showtime, you have to watch Yellow Jackets on Showtime instead of downloading the app. Like, why don't you just like subscribe here? And
And buy the
yeah, keep
popcorn that you're going to be eating when you watch the TV show.
exactly. And it really keeps you like as we call it, like recirc, right? It keeps you engaging with Amazon Prime Video and
Yes.
keeps you engaging with Amazon services itself. So it's just like this is it. This is your, you don't
Yeah.
need to go anywhere else.
Yeah, when you're building an app, it's like an unspoken or maybe absolutely spoken rule that everything you design has to keep uh, the person using the app, the user, contained within the app itself. Like you're not trying to send them to another place or another source or
Unless
another
that's
product.
another one of your properties, yeah.
Yes, unless it's part of the massive conglomerate family that you are a part of, then
Yes.
absolutely.
It's yeah, and recirculation is such an important metric in like measuring engagement, measuring, eventually the bottom of the funnel, like revenue, retention. All of that comes from, if you're not recirculating, you're not spending, increasing the time spent on your services, it's problematic.
Yeah,
So
but I feel like these are also metrics that are reviewed by the people that are making the decision behind what media to keep continuing because
yeah.
it's not the prime goal, pardon the pun, of the service to create incredible content or art that withstands the test of time. It
Yes.
is to make money for Amazon, the conglomerate. And if a terrible show is making people click around and buy disposable garbage from the Amazon Commerce Center, and they're looking for products that the person on the TV show is eating or drinking from Whole Foods and buying it for delivery themselves, that's making them more money than like
That's success for them, yeah.
yeah, than something that isn't seeing that engagement on the same level from something that may be of a better artistic quality but has less commercial engagement with their end users. And that
Very
very
true.
well could be a metric on how like stuff gets renewed.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and I think this is a larger conversation of like, do streamers really care if it's like a critical success and it like forwards like the entertainment industry and uplifts the entertainment industry? Like something could be like literal trash and could increase their subscriptions, could increase their like e-commerce, could like merchandising, all of that, and it would be a success for them, and
Yeah.
they just kind of turn a blind eye to the I guess insults and like critical failure.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
That's one I feel key difference between network television and streaming is that the product of streaming services often become an advertisement for the service itself. If you're watching Stranger Things and you like it, you're much more likely to go watch other stuff on Netflix. Whereas I doubt there was anybody who was exploring like a particular network television like channel because of one thing that was made within it. I think
Right.
if you liked CSI, you're going to like all the other CSIs that were on CBS, but what I'm saying is you did not come for CSI and stay for Big Bang Theory. It was like you either like CSI or you like Big Bang Theory and you just happen to watch it on CBS. Like that's the network
Yeah.
that it's on. You're not like, I really love the Big Bang Theory. Let me stay on CBS all day long to see if
Mhm.
there's any other content that matches its themes and intent and, you know, quality that I can
Yeah.
connect with. You don't necessarily think of it that way. It's not like you're watching This Is Us on NBC and then sticking around and waiting to see what else is on NBC that's just like This Is Us, because that's not how network television is built. But
There's no algorithm driven like
yeah,
recommendations like, oh, you watched one episode of This Is Us, like here's 10 other things. Like that's
yeah.
never gonna
It's
happen.
not an advertisement for the network. It's not that, do you like This Is Us? Watch it on NBC and then stick around and watch like NBC for the rest of the day. Sure. Whereas with streaming services, it's like, oh, if you enjoyed The Man in the High Castle, you subscribed or you were checking out other stuff on Amazon Prime. If you
Yeah.
liked Stranger Things, I think it brought like a lot of people on board to Netflix because people were like, Stranger Things this, Stranger Things that. And people were left out of the conversation going, well, I better get in on this and check it out.
Okay, this really bothers me. Can we talk about the home screen for a hot sec? Because that
Yes.
is, it's just like there's like no curation. My eye is just like it starts to hurt because I sometimes I don't know where I left off with a particular show or a movie because I don't know where to find it. Everything is just like yelling at me. And
Yeah.
it's like very, the tiles are very big. The tiles are all just like weirdly, doesn't seem to doesn't seem to all fit into a theme of what the service is telling me. And the scroll is endless. The little like sections don't seem to make sense. And I find a lot of the time that I click on a piece of content that maybe looks interesting, it turns out it's not included in the service, or it's not available or something like that within my subscription. And that's such a dangerous thing because that is a journey ender, right? You want to keep the person circulating, you want to keep them, you
Yeah.
want to extend the journey. And that's such an opportunity loss because at
Yeah.
that point I'm like, I'm just going to go to home and switch to Netflix instead and click on what is the surprise me feature.
Yeah. Yeah. The
You
shuffle,
know,
sort of. Yeah.
the shuffle. And it's so interesting to think about how they've like really leaned into, which I just mentioned as one of my likes, the content integrations, just like integrating with all of these third party services. But this is precisely where they're suffering on their homepage because they don't know how to organize that along with the included Prime original content. And they don't know how to organize that and make tell you a story that's meaningful to you as this special customer, as you one in the world, right? Like we are paying attention to you and this is what matters to you, and this is worthy your time, this is worth your time. And yeah, so I find just myself struggling. This might be my least favorite just home screen ever. It just I kind of dread moments when I have to click on the Prime Video app, which is saying a lot because I spend a lot of time on streamers, and you know, I would say I have not gone on Prime Video as an app very much. I did for this pod, but I have not just personally because as a Fire TV owner, I'll just get Prime content to me fed through like ads or like recommendations, and that is where I just interact
Yeah.
with Prime content. And that's it. Like I just don't even bother with going to the app.
Okay, so
And
it's
I
pretty
was
clear that the experience very much depends on like how you're consuming Prime, whether it's your phone or your laptop or your TV. It's not the
yes.
same across all of them.
And I know that they did the UI redesign, which honestly I have not interacted with that much. UI redesign, what, like a couple weeks ago that they launched it, and they're still
Mm-hmm.
rolling that out.
UI
And
being user
hopefully,
interface.
yes, they are rolling out this change. Hopefully, because they heard a lot about these similar pain points. So hopefully, they've addressed some of these things, but it was enough of a pain point that they were like, we got to do something about it. And I read this, Nielsen study from a few years ago that an average customer spends 18 minutes per day deciding what to watch. this is from a few years ago. 18 minutes might not be relevant right now. I think it might be much less. But I
Yeah,
think
I think
when
we're
you're
at the half an
competing,
hour mark right now, honestly.
if we're competing with 7 other streamers, and this explosion of content that's happening right now, it's just a huge opportunity loss where you're just like confusing the customer even further and just kind of sending them to your competitors or just turning them away from your service. So yeah, that's one. And I would say the second thing that really bothers me is, well, I don't know if it has bothered me lately, but it might be a really very focused and intelligent strategy from their side, is the product placement of their retail store that's happening more and more as I watch shows. So I noticed this in The Boys, which is, again, we cannot recommend enough. Incredible show. But when you pause the episodes, there's now a VOT International like econ like just store that you can click on, and then you click on this link and it's like a merch store for VOT, which, I mean, VOT serves as, I don't know how glib they're being, but VOT is basically Amazon, right? And
I
we're
don't
not
know if
supposed to.
Amazon knows that VOT is Amazon.
This is incredible because we're not supposed to like VOT at all in this show. And it's just like VOT is selling because they control, if you haven't seen the show, VOT is the company that sort of is in charge of the superheroes in the world, the Seven, and they tell them they're kind of like a PR marketing firm as well. Like, you cannot take care of this crime because it's not good for your numbers or your audience or
They're also a media
you.
company as well.
Exactly, they
And they're
are.
in pharmaceuticals and they're in commerce. They're
Are they
Amazon.
Amazon?
They're
They're
100% Amazon. Amazon wants to purchase One Medical. They're definitely going into that private healthcare route as well. I am not 100% certain if Amazon realizes that VOT is Amazon, or they realize it and they're like, we don't care. And they know that they can get away with it. So it's like, I don't know, leaning into it in some way, or
yeah. I
using
mean,
it as
I
a
would
shield
say,
from actual criticism. I don't know.
yeah, I that's very interesting. But yeah, you when you click on this link, you can buy like uniforms for the Seven that range from like $20 to like $100 or even more. Stickers and shirts that say "diabolical," which is a catchphrase from the show. Um, so interesting. I think from an integrations perspective, probably some executive, behind the scenes is going, wow, incredible, we're getting a lot of clicks here, we're getting a lot of like sales. But from a content perspective, it seems very, if you're a new customer and you're new audience, you're just getting used to the show and you quickly realize that VOT is not good, and then you see like sort of that kind of placement, it might be a huge turnoff for you to continue the show. And I've seen The Boys actually used as a metric in their press releases, that they actually talk about specifically that The Boys season increased for us this many subscriptions and increased for us this much engagement. And it's a very important marquee show for them. And I think maybe, who knows, maybe this strategy is really paying off for them right now. Like, the people are engaging with the retail store. But I think moving forward, I think we gotta be. I would imagine this sort of strategy where it's like, let's say disconnected from what the content is telling you, could turn into like a movement.
What I wanted to particularly highlight, and maybe it's not necessarily a feature of the streaming service, but of Amazon Video as a product, is that they're doing a lot of productions within, I think, the next biggest movie industry, which is the Indian film industry, and by which I mean the multiple Indian languages within the conglomerate of the
Multiple industries.
yeah
Yeah.
overall Indian film industry. So there are a lot of movies that are released in the different regional languages of India that I'm seeing. It's nice to see variety within that content. I think that Amazon has done a similar thing that streaming has done for a lot of what would formerly be considered like independent movies now being available for people to see on a platform. So you have audiences everywhere across America able to see movies like Manchester by the Sea, Power of the Dog, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and weird, cool, small shit like that on a streaming platform in the comfort of your own home where you can share it with people that you're watching it with, talk about it, and like really have that fun of like dissecting a movie and its themes and what it means to you and stuff like that. And I like that the same thing is being applied to Indian cinema because they're also extremely commercial minded. It's like whatever sells, that's what we'll make. So it's like the same love story over and over again. Like some guy named Rahul is fighting over some girl named either Priya or Pooja or Anjali or whatever generic ass name, um,
It's true. How many
female
Angelis have there
character.
been? Yeah.
And I think it gives like the opportunity to tell deeper stories, platform younger filmmakers, and actually allow us to show the nuance of what a country of a billion plus people have. So, and I get that that's my perspective because I am of Indian origin. So that's what I'm looking at. But I think eventually Amazon wants to do this with a lot of different film industries. It's going by the numbers, right? And in terms of like the Indian market and the Chinese market, because Amazon doesn't operate within mainland China, they don't have the entryway there. So they went to the next biggest film market, which makes complete sense to me because it's also like very comparable monetarily and from a reach, from a reach perspective. It's
Yeah.
reaching a lot of people in the diaspora. So I appreciate that they may be trying to give that platform to a lot of filmmakers in other countries where their content is kind of overlooked
Hmm.
in general.
The world is so much bigger now because you have like easy access at your fingertips to these things. So that's definitely great.
Yeah. I know that there is a redesign, I think, that's happening prior to, I think, the expected traffic that they're going to get with the Lord of the Rings series that's coming out. Um,
They
so
know what
they
they're
they
doing
know
with
that they
this. Yeah.
want to make those changes, but there is still, I would say, until that's happening, I can just talk about the current experience and the design language of the homepage or the whole Amazon Prime Video experience is very unique, which is not a good thing for digital design or product design because you want something that's familiar, repeatable, and takes people very little time to get familiar with and you start
Hmm.
using. And the more time you're spending on just trying to learn how to use a product is time taken away from actually using it. So instead of getting to watching content, you're like, how do I look for stuff? How do I search for things? Can I pick up where I last left off on a series I was watching? It's very difficult to do that. And they haven't prioritized this before because it's not the main part of their business, right? They haven't even
Yes.
improved or cleaned up the main Amazon e-commerce like shopping parts. It's very ugly compared to if you go to a brand's website. If you go to a high-end brand like Gucci or you go to an absolutely affordable middle of the range brand like Old Navy or
H&M or something.
yeah. I'm trying to think of ones that are like Aeropostale, like stuff you see at the mall. They have websites to buy their clothes from, so you don't have to go to the store. And I'm not saying they're groundbreaking or spectacular, but they're clean, very easy to use, and doesn't take that much time in figuring out how to get exactly what you want and get the hell out of there.
Yeah. All right, should we move on to just quickly discussing the business strategy here? What is the strategy powering these tech decisions that we've, kind of shed some light into? I want to say, I think one of the things that we've already mentioned is what's huge is the M&A that's happening, the mergers and acquisitions that are happening in the industry, right? The In order to stay competitive, we are seeing like bigger companies are throwing all of their cash at anything that helps them generate stories, get eyeballs in front of their content,
Yeah, it's
butts on
also like
couches, butts in seats.
it's a common thing in product where you have the build versus buy question,
Yep.
where
Yep.
if you want something, do you build it from scratch or do you just use what's already existing? And in this case, buy very literally means like purchasing something else. But it may be in the long run less expensive than like starting from the very bottom and building up all of the technical work and the social infrastructure of like promotion, marketing, PR, etc. To just be like, oh, this is already there, let's use it. And just buy it up, scoop it up.
It's also right when you buy an intellectual property, it's a sure bet that it's going to pay off. For example, Disney bought 21st Century Fox to keep its content machine spinning, and now we're seeing X-Men and Fantastic Four come out. Now they can finally announce they're doing something with
I'm
it,
pretty
right?
sure they bought it just for that.
They
I
sure,
think people want to
absolutely did.
see Wolverine again.
Absolutely did. And they know it's going to be a sure bet. They know it's going to pay off. They can make original content
Mm-hmm.
when they own something with this. So, and then Comcast buying like Sky UK to expand its Peacock rollout in the UK and Ireland. So just kind of, where can we get in and where can we buy content? Where can we get in and where can we buy an existing property that helps us expand into a certain region, expand our original content. And now with Amazon, we're seeing huge thing, right? Last year they bought MGM, and MGM is among many other things the parent of Bond. And what does this mean? Like, I don't know, who knows what this means, but it could mean a Bond TV show. I mean, it depends on the broccolis. Um, but it could mean like it could it mean like Javier Bardem comes back and interacts with like Christoph Waltz, like it could, like the possibilities are endless. And this is,
It
if
could
you
mean
own the
Elle Woods from Legally Blonde is now Legally Bond because they own both
a
franchises.
it's like, it's ridiculous because like having the rights, like it's in a way it's exciting having the rights to these. For an audience, you get to definitely have, more content, but it's also like, this could go anywhere. This could go with this like creative rights and content expansion like coming together. This could be a tricky thing to navigate as the
Yeah.
audience and as someone working in the industry as well. But
Yeah.
this is definitely the strategy that they're going with as they put more attention to their streaming service. They want to make sure that they have sure bets lined up to content that they want to play with, content that pays off. And we've already seen that's working so well for the existing streamers, especially Disney.
Yeah.
Um,
That
and yeah,
acquisition was very much about the IP, the intellectual property involved, I feel.
absolutely.
I think they just wanted a studio machination that was like already set up and experienced in distribution and production, and leveraging like almost 100 years of existence of the MGM studio. So that's
Yes.
crazy.
One of the top 5 studios. And I'm wondering, what does it mean for their library? Is it at our fingertips if we
I don't
go on
know.
Prime Video?
I
Like,
don't
I can
know.
see anything ever, or does it become another tier of like, this is, I mean, assuredly, like, it's going to become like, it's going to add to your membership. I was looking up some stats and I saw this by TV Tech Analysis. It said 40% of the content that's coming out right now, at least 40% of the content now relies on existing IP, intellectual property, and franchises. I mean, it's become so crazy because now the success for content has become very streaming oriented, right? It's very like, I was listening to the Big Picture podcast recently, and they were talking about Prey, the new Predator movie that just came out on
Mm-hmm.
Hulu, just like quietly dropped. And it's basically, they were talking about how it's basically a ploy by execs to ensure that the Hulu numbers stay stable for the month of August. So it's just
Could
like
be.
everything serves the streamer instead of thinking about releasing Prey in the theaters. It's become about how to stay competitive in the streaming game and
Yeah,
have a
it could
movie to
be.
like really curb your attrition. And it's going to be interesting to see this huge studio of MGM kind of serving like, a streamer,
I
like
mean, they
how
were
to keep the
broke.
streamer afloat.
MGM was not
We
in good
should
shape.
mention that.
They were
Yes.
they were they had filed for bankruptcy, so it's not like they were at the top of their game, and they really had the Bond franchise that was pulling them along, which they lost a ton of money during the pandemic because this release was shelved. So I think there is just that, yeah, they have that ripe IP. Amazon is not hamstrung by a physical theater only distribution model, so they can like make their money back.
Yeah. Yeah. So strategy of mergers and acquisitions is a good, well, seems like a good strategy. We'll see where it lands. But
I'm
definitely seems like shook the industry, both tech
Yeah.
and the entertainment
I'm just
industry.
saying be careful, guys.
I will say it reminded me of how Michael Kors bought Versace, and I was like, wait, what now? I always thought it would be the other way around. Some sort of prestige being. I will just leave it there. Let's just leave it there for the audience to suss out. But with that, I think that is a wrap for today. I think it was, with our love and admiration for Rings of Power, it was also important to talk about what Amazon's strategy is, how their background of, like what their service is prepared to handle, where their service is right now in the landscape of streamers, and where they want to go next. It's very interesting to see. I mean, honestly, like they're building a Westworld of sorts, like having controlling our data, our grocery habits, our reading habits, our shopping habits, our
Murderous
wellness habits.
drones. The drones are coming.
Dolores. Shouts to Dolores.
Yeah, that's gonna be the name of their sentient AI that's running the drones.
the drones that deliver your packages to you. Could happen. So it's Jeff Bezos as Robert Ford. Wow, I'm spinning in this Westworld metaphor right now.
Come on,
But
Jeffrey, you can do it. Pave the way, put your back into it.
incredible. With all that said, though, I think yes, that was a great examination for myself. I learned a lot. I had a great time talking to you, Raven. And in summary, I would say very, very excited about Rings of Power. Still very excited about Rings of Power, I should say. And we hope you are too. And we are very much looking forward to it September 2nd. For our next episode, I'll just plug that in right now. We are focusing on ratings platforms. So we're going to talk a little bit about latest summer blockbusters that have struggled on ratings platforms. So The Gray Man, Jurassic World Dominion, a little bit about Thor Love and Thunder, and then we'll go into the Rotten Tomatoes conundrum, Letterboxd, IMDb, CinemaScore, Metacritic. How are these? Why do we rely on them so much? How are they powered? What is the tech that powers them? How reliable are they? All that jazz. So we'll talk about that next time. Until then, thank you so much for listening. Remember to find us on socials, Twitter and Instagram as @fullscreen_pod, YouTube as, what is it, Raven?
We are the Full Screen Podcast on YouTube.
On YouTube. And then please remember to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars so other people can find us if you can. Rate us and follow us on Spotify or wherever you're listening. Reach out to us if you have any thoughts or topic suggestions. We're always listening. We'd love to talk about this landscape with you. Stay well, stay safe. Until next time, full screeners. Bye!
Bye, everyone.